here in the Springfield line by the ball field, you can hit a few of those potholes, road irregularities or whatever. Do they assess it and say, we're going to work on this section, we're going to leave it? Or should all these things should we believe that all these things are going to be fixed? Regardless of whether it's a big pothole or... I was down over by Maple Road, and coming from the south end up to Maple Road, there's, I don't know if it's a manhole cover that is sunk, but you're behind a truck that goes over it. It sounds like something crashed. And I know that along Long Meadow Street, there seems to be more of those ruts or whatever. And my question is there some, do we defer things saying that road's going to be paved, but we might not know that when someone's calling up or something reporting it? I mean, is it just by response that we're fixing them?
There's not an absolute rule in terms of what gets fixed. There's a somewhat of a, formula. There's an evaluation process that goes into determining what gets fixed and what doesn't. Obviously, if it's a sunken structure, that's a much bigger deal than just filling a pothole with hot asphalt. Like I said, it would depend on what the specific situation is. Okay. We evaluate them all, and then of course it's resources, whose responsibility is it, is it a utility manhole or something like that. Okay. So there's a variety of factors that would be considered.
Stephen, just a quick comment. Should people, residents, assume that the town's going to find potholes and DLAMs, or should they be actively reporting anything they see?
They should, if they have the app or if they just want to call, they should be reporting what they see. Okay. It may be on the list. It doesn't hurt to report it. That's why we have the app, is so people can. We talked last year about our lack of resources and manpower to just go out and do inspections, and that's the app gives everybody with a smartphone the power to be an inspector.
I would imagine there's very few people in our town who realize that behind those potholes is just kind of documentation and backup.
Well, and metrics in terms of how you evaluate a main line pothole versus a side street, right. The depth and and then the best industry best standards for kind of filling those.
Well, another thing too. After a severe winter like we've had, this is a base information for grant writing and for getting money out of Boston and everything else. So everything about this is positive. Mm-hmm. This type of workload documentation. So, anyway, anything else, Stephen?
I don't think anything.
Richard, can I ask you?
Sure.
Stephen, in your report, you also commented about our I think it's our Bondi's Island contract
mm-hmm.
that's coming up.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed to indicate, and I know this isn't the case, that it's a negotiation. It's not like we got a choice of where to take our sewage, right?
We met with them today, and I think and I don't want to get too much into it because there may be an executive session on this coming up, to be honest with you. You're right. It's not like we're going to
take our sewage elsewhere.
Yeah, it's, I don't think that. But there are policy changes that were made from the 1973 contract, which we read, to the 2005 contract, which is the one we're looking to renew, that make it so towns, the commission believes all towns that are participants should participate financially in capital improvements to facilities that the towns don't have chargeable flow through. So our waste doesn't go there. And in the original 73 agreement, the intent was clear: the town shouldn't have to pay for facilities that it doesn't send waste to. The 2005 agreement got away from that, although it didn't really contemplate specific capital improvements, which is probably one of the reasons why we said, okay, now it's all part of one big system. And we've kind of pushed back against that notion, saying, why should we be contributing to Indian Orchard pump station? We don't go anywhere near there. And so we've been having a dialogue with them and kind of asking, and today it was just really, why is this the policy? What changed? It seems to be a fairness issue when you look at some of the language in the contract. So, it may end up being we just change the date on the contract and we just have to absorb the rates as they present, including their capital plans. But we thought we owe it to the ratepayers to at least, ask questions and kind of push back against it.
Thank you.
All right.
Right, that's what when I read that, I thought, wow, good for you, going back a couple of contracts rather than just saying, we've got this contract, this is where we're going, to look at historically if there were any changes, because those could be big changes. So thanks a lot for catching that.
You want to tell the public about that fire department
Yeah, I was just
grant?
going to, yes.
Okay.
I buried the lead. The fire department received a very large grant, almost $189,000 to replace SCBA apparatus for the entire department. There's a local match of about $10,000 that we have submitted a reserve fund request for, because it is unbudgeted, but I don't know if you recall during our discussion about the compressor, but the fire chief gave somewhat of a not lengthy, but a detailed summary of why a new compressor would eventually be needed and the change over to new SCBA equipment and tanks and all that stuff. Because of the cost of this equipment, we were going to have to request replacement in phases, and the first phase was only, the first 2 phases were tanks only, and then you have air regulators like you'd have like for LP on your gas grill, masks and the cradle that the thing sits in, and a whole bunch of other stuff besides just the tank. And this pays for the whole setup, masks, cradle, regulators, tanks, the whole thing, and we get it all at once. To some extent, this elevates now the compressor as a priority, which had been a lower priority, as the chief had said, because we were slowly transitioning to the new tanks. This elevates the priority, but that's a $45,000 item. This is $190,000 we're getting from the federal government. So it's a huge win. I need to commend the fire department. I don't want to throw the chief under the bus, but he turned over the grant writing assignments to a couple of the captains because he's transitioning out, and we were successful where we hadn't been in the past. So I was quick to point that out to him.
Yeah. This doesn't cover the compressor, though, does it?
Does not.
Okay.
No. Like the only reason I brought the compressor up is because in the context of our conversation, he said we don't really need the compressor now because we're going to be slowly
Right.
transitioning to these new tanks.
Right.
And now the transition is going to happen a lot more
So
quickly.
we'll expect to see that on the next
Yeah.
year capital program then.
Very much so.
Yeah.
I think, as he said, we could go to other departments and fill air. It still is not, if we didn't have it next year, it still wouldn't be meaning the end of the department. They'll get their tanks filled
Yeah.
one way or the other. It just is, it really, then you're set for a number of years with the CBA stuff.
All right. Any other questions? Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, middle school facility assessment. In the report, it says, as previously reported, I don't recall us talking about the JCJ report and the upgrade of it for $10,000, or less than $10,000. The question I have is this something that, since the select board voted against the statements of interest for the schools, if we're going to do a facility assessment, I'm assuming that as the caretaker of the buildings, we already know what's wrong with the facility. I would like to understand why we're requesting JCJ to update, because that update was supposed to get us to the starting point and say, okay, here we are from now on, we're maintaining those records when we did the JCJ report years ago.
They did the original 2008 study, and what we wanted was a more detailed analysis of the condition of specific building components and systems in a way that we may know, we have an idea that certain components of the fire suppression system may need replacing, but not in the level of detail that this firm would. We don't have a facilities engineer on our payroll full-time. We have a facilities director and a facilities manager, but not someone who can really get into the engineering of it. The whole purpose of doing this was watching the discussion about the SOIs. A lot of questions that were raised, and I recall the school committee saying that as a part of the SOI feasibility study, a lot of these questions would be answered, but it seemed that the board, and I agreed, would want some of these questions minimally answered prior to making that level of commitment. And so, in the interest of being somewhat proactive, and because we really couldn't answer the questions to the level of detail that I think the community wanted to see, we decided to say, well, what would it cost us to go and do an in-depth look at the buildings, and if needed, pull back certain finishes, really get into the nitty-gritty of it, and then do a prioritized list. And I'd reported it in an email because I remember Mark had responded saying he wanted to be a prioritized list. So that was the nature of it, and, it's under $10,000, and we'll have to see if we can accommodate that in the budget in this fiscal year, or go back to the finance committee. But I feel like it's important. It's not a huge amount of money, and I think it's good information to have for planning purposes, so it just seemed like a good idea to at least, the buildings are still continuing to age. Even if we don't know what we're going to do with middle schools, we still have to address the facilities themselves.
Any other
But,
questions?
yeah, but I guess my point is what changed from the time where you got the original JCJ report? It's just the building's older, the systems may be failing a little bit more, meaning the boiler that was 12 years old is now, 18 years old and that type of thing. What do we expect to get out of it that we don't know already about the buildings?
Well, I think we also want to catalog things that we have done to the buildings, and that's important. I think the superintendent alluded, or if I was the chair. The MSBA wants to see that you haven't ignored your buildings either. So we want a catalog of what we've done to the buildings in the last 7 years. And like I said, updated cost estimates and prioritization.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, Stephen, thank you. Do you have anything else, Stephen, on your report?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you. I guess we'll move on to the town meeting discussion with the moderator. Good evening. Good evening.
What have you got to tell me?
Do you have a copy of the warrant this year?
Well, I do have a copy of the warrant. Now, I don't know whether this is the latest warrant, but it's the one I have.
Yeah. Yeah, this one's dated May 12th. Oh, that's the time of the meeting. Well, I got a copy here today.
This is, I got the motions. Is that-
Yeah, the
but
motion-
I've
the
got
motion
the warrant
one. Okay.
that was distributed in the reminder.
16th day of March.
Yeah, that's when the meeting's
That's when you
coming.
posted.
Yeah. I would imagine, Stephen, do you know which copy you got? Did he get one today? Or for the meeting?
He would have gotten one in the mail with this paper. I don't know. I would have assumed you got one. That's
Oh, I
accurate.
always get the emailed copy of the
Oh,
warrant. I
okay.
just don't know what the one that I have is the one, because as you know, I get at least 5 different copies of the warrant 5 days before the town meeting.
Yeah. I think we'll call it current to the moment.
Right.
How about, what do we have? Got any questions for the moderator on this? or-
Oh. I don't know if the monitor. I don't.
Well, I guess
specifically.
I would like to know the who's moving what and so forth.
Here's a copy of the motion. I can get that to you.
We haven't,
Okay.
You have a copy of the motion, sir?
This is a copy of the motions as of April 9th. I know I made some changes Friday. So but my changes are in the nature of what I'd call fine tuning. This one has the names of the people. You can have that.
Oh, okay.
I've got the first 5 items, or 5 articles.
Yeah.
Then Paul goes from 6 down to number 10. Mark goes from 11 down to 15. Marie is from 16 down to, looks like 20, and or 19, and Alex is 20 to the end, to 24.
All right, well, just let me know if there's a change in the order of presentation, but I'll assume that this is the individuals that'll be moving the particular articles.
Have you always read this entire thing?
yes.
Okay.
No, the dollar
Yeah.
amounts? No.
Okay. So on Article 3, I'll go ahead and request permission to, how do you want that
Yeah, read
phrased?
the first paragraph, the
Yeah.
last paragraph, and refer to the ones, and the
Right.
stuff in the middle is the
Yeah,
published budget.
the main motion is a simple one.
Mhm.
You just move the requested amount, and it should be as printed in the warrant, or town meeting needs to have the up-to-date figures. So with the, remember that with the when you announce the budget, where the changes are in the budget that differ from what town meeting has. It's always, I know that changes happen in the, very quickly. But as the town meeting is following the budget review, we certainly want to have, before the town meeting, the correct figures by department, not the total amount, because you know what the total amount is, but as they're reading down from, for example, general government, that figure should be the same figure that's in the motion unless otherwise, and let town meeting know, because you can't, of course, as you know, keep town meeting out of the process.
Right.
So
Well, we were just
a matter
discussing
of,
on whether we need to read each line item, and I guess previously we've not done that.
Well, so long as it's printed, as printed in
Okay.
the warrant, there's no
We'll
need to.
make sure that-
Because it's printed right there for the town meeting to see.
The full budget with all the line items is part of what's given to the folks.
Right.
But is the motion going to read each of the lines? General government, public safety, and the amounts? I mean, I think usually those are, plus the text here.
If it as printed in the warrant, then you don't need to read the individual figures,
But you
because
read 'em.
Right.
you're telling the town meeting that it's as printed in your warrant. So you're limited to those figures.
Yeah, I can read it. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't mean
It's
if
the
it's
important
that-
part of the town meeting, we should just read them.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we
Okay.
did
Just
it
read it.
how everybody wanted it done.
That's-
I mean, as we sit here right now,
To you.
the numbers, absent an amendment on the town meeting floor, the numbers are what they are.
So, Stephen, I was going to ask about that, because did we revise the capital, Article 4, in terms of this lease buy
It's in the
thing?
motion.
That's been, is reflected in the
Should be in the
motion?
motion, yeah.
Which is least.
Okay, so it's in the motion, but not in what was published in the reminder, though,
No, we hadn't discussed it at that point. I don't think.
right? All I'm saying is, what, rewording,
It says on Article 4, it says,
Yeah,
noted
you look at the
exception
warrant.
of the DPW highway dump truck with plow, which will be leased, and that remaining amounts. Look-
right, and so that the total amount that we're appropriating is not 1,390,300, correct? It's 162,300 less, correct?
Not necessarily. We have the lease estimate, but we haven't actually procured the lease.
But
we
the
know- we
lease
know-
isn't a capital expenditure.
Sure.
No, the lease is an operating expense,
Well,
which
it's-
has to go into the operating budget.
Well, we have it,
Now's
the
that
rest
good
is
time
going to
talk
the
about
capital
this.
stabilization fund, though.
What?
We agreed that it was going to go, the money saved would go back to the capitalization stabilization fund.
Well, honestly, Mark, I went back and watched the meeting, and it was discussed here, the directive was, have the motion reflect the lease. We had already published the warrant. If you want to amend the numbers on the floor through a different motion or making them, do whatever, that's fine, but we were told, have the motion reflect the lease, and that's
Right,
the best way
but-
we could figure out how to do it.
And this isn't an indictment of anybody, Stephen, but my understanding of have the motion reflect the lease would have been that the motion shows that that's not a capital expenditure, and in fact, if it's a lease payments are operating budget, because they're not capital.
Well, then that really
So-
messes up the budget.
No joke, Marie, and that was my whole thought, that we have to go through and take a certain amount out of the capital, put it back into the operating budget, and then increase the line item for the DPW by that amount of the lease.
That's-
Absolutely.
That was not my understanding.
The point is, you can't, right now, the operating budget doesn't show the funds available to pay a lease. And more importantly, the capital budget shows funds that says, "and will be leased." But I understand it says will be leased, but that doesn't allow us to do that necessarily.
Then we won't do it this year.
No, I think we can do it, and we want to do it this year. It's a simple matter of, because in fact, the numbers are, 162,000 comes out of the capital budget, Article 4. That bottom line, 1,390,300, gets reduced by $162,300, okay? And on the operating budgets part, we increased the general government operating budget by the cost of the lease.
Well, where are you going to pull that out of the operating budget then?
We're not going to pull anything out of we're adding to the operating budget.
Exactly.
Well, we've got money, because money is appropriated from residents, from taxes, and some goes to capital, right? We take
Yeah, we have
2 and 3/4%?
we have a policy of how much we're going to put
Right.
towards capital.
But this year, we're taking 162,300 less out of capital, because that's what we voted. We're not going to put it in capital, we're going to use it as a lease.
I didn't
To
see
me, that was a way of saving the residents money.
It doesn't save the residents any money.
Of course it does.
Well, the
Instead
money
of
that goes
spending
back
in
in capital stabilization is general fund money.
Right. It's all general fund money, but if we don't spend it in capital, Marie, here's the personal example. Don't take it out of your checking account, put it, or savings account, which is leave it in your checking account, okay? And we're going to spend less out of the checking account this year. We're not going to spend $162,000 this year
In
on the
capital,
truck,
but you're
correct?
now increasing your operating budget.
Well, you have to. How else are you going to pay for the lease? A lease is not capital, Marie, by definition. You can't pay for leases out of a capital vote.
Well, I thought we were saving money in leasing it in order to be able to put more money in our capital infrastructure.
That's
And
not what happened.
That's what I understood, and that's why we said it would be
We took the
going-
$162,000, and then we said we're going to make a lease buy decision on 160. I mean, somebody else weigh in here. Didn't we say we were going to?
I was trying to.
Yeah, we just were waiting for the bike stuff. Go ahead, Alex.
I'm not fighting, I'm just.
No, I didn't.
No, Marie, I think you're right in there was a thought that we could take some of that money that would be freed up from the lease for other capital projects. The problem was we didn't know at the time what the lease buy option was, so we couldn't really do that. But
And we still don't know exactly because we don't
Right.
have the lease.
But we got a decent estimate. I mean, I guess the point I would make, from a sort of common sense voter looking at this will cause major confusion. You can't put in the article, we want to pay for the following things, except the thing that we put on the list. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, we've got to take that out of the list of items and then not have to make the exception for it. I mean, it seems to me that Mark is exactly right in terms of just taking the amount of money that we think the lease is going to cost, plus a little bit more to make sure, we've got ourselves covered, add it to the operating budget, and then take 162.3 out of the capital budget. I mean, this doesn't seem that complicated.
Why are you taking 162.3 out of the capital budget if you only need 16 or 17,000? Why don't you just pick up another capital item?
Well, if we want to do that right now, we could discuss it, but we hadn't decided
I mean,
on that.
you're going to throw 162,000 back over into a balanced budget.
Yeah.
No, we're not going to put it in the expense side.
Where are you going to put it?
We're going to tax less. We're going to raise 100 and pick the number, 120,000 less if 42,000 is the lease cost. We will raise 120,000 less, which means we tax less, Rich. That was the whole idea.
The whole discussion is getting sillier by the moment. We sat in here and argued to increase our capital program because we need to fix our infrastructure, and now we're saying we're going to take this 162 and get it out and lease and give the money back to somebody. We'll make up our mind.
I mean, in principle, you would be violating the capital policy by not using it on a subsequent capital item. And that's fine, Mark.
Right.
I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I'm just saying it is. By extension, you'd also only be violating the capital policy by paying for the lease with capital stabilization funds. So rather than wreak havoc and confusion at the town meeting, this is just the most straight line way to do it. I mean, one way or another, the capital, under your scenario, the capital policy gets, doesn't get adhered to, just have to pick which one. Or you can go through the whole thing and,
I guess
do
the
whatever.
question is, why did we vote to lease instead of buy? And was it, Richard, and to your point, was it to have more money available for other capital items, or was it to save tax money for the residents because leasing was cheaper than buying.
Well,
And those are distinct, and we didn't talk about it.
Yeah, we
apparently.
went, both Paul and I went back and watched the meeting to make sure we had this right, and it was not talked about at all.
I hear you, it wasn't discussed, but obviously, I thought differently from the way it was written here, that's all.
my
Rich?
understanding
Yeah.
was that
Right
your
after.
finance committee wanted to try a pilot project of lease buy to see if this was going to work. And this was a pilot project to see if we could save money in the future. The subcommittee never came forward saying, we're trying to find ways in order to cut down on taxes in the future. And in fact, there was no understanding of the end game other than, let's try this as a pilot project. So now you're saying, well, if we really had a policy that we wanted to cut, which I agree we should be doing, then we should have, as a board, said, well, this is a policy and this is what we're going to try to do in the future. Instead, this program was just brought forward and said, we want to try this. And
For
that's
the
why we put it.
purposes of saving the town money.
That's not, for the purposes of saving money. That's true.
For the purposes of
But
saving money,
Not
right.
to cut.
Well,
I understood. So
saving
now
money-
you're saying you want to
right.
cut back on our policy that we all voted on 2 months
No,
ago.
I didn't say that,
And-
Marty, at
well,
all.
that's-
What I said
I'm confused.
is the purpose of lease versus buy was to save the town money. Save money, because we don't use this truck 12 months a year, we only use it 3 or 4 or 5 months a year, and we could lease it for 3 or 4 or 5 months a year at a lower cost. That was the analysis that was done. You know, my take is that if you're going to save money, you're right. What do you do with the money you save? That discussion didn't get completed.
But your assumption is we have no backlog.
I'm not making that assumption at all, Richard.
Well,
No, Richard. What I'm saying is, what do you do with the money you save? Okay? And first, we've got to assume if we are going to save money, then we should answer, what do you, I got no problem if we say, take the money we save and do something more with it. That's okay too, but because we don't have anything on the list more, that we haven't voted anything more to do with that, and we can sit here right now and say, let's increase sidewalk construction by that amount,
Yeah,
and when we read the name, do that.
Well, we
If
did cut the funds out of those.
Rich, I'm not saying don't do it.
From the
I'm
town
saying,
manager's recommendations.
I didn't say don't do that. I'm saying we ought to define where that $162,300 that's not going to get spent on purchasing a truck goes. I'm not opposed necessarily to saying we're going to put 120,000 more into sidewalks and 42,000 into the lease system. I just thought that since we didn't go that route, the 120,000, I'm just using that number, that doesn't go in the lease, ends up being less money we tax the residents, that's all.
That discussion was never brought before the board.
I agree with you, it was
Till
not.
now.
I agree with you, I'm not arguing that it was
Okay.
brought before the board, but the point is that to make this warrant work based on the lease, I believe the $162,000 ought not be read as a capital expenditure. And we can do one of two things. We can do it now, or we can defer it till the fall town meeting, or whatever it is. But I also believe if we're going to spend money on lease payments, we need to increase the operating budget so that we can pay for those lease payments out of the DPW operating budget. It's that simple. I
Well,
mean,
as I say, it's a simple, we're going to violate the policy one way or the
well,
other.
but policy is different than violating state law on
I
budgeting.
know, it's a policy. You can violate a policy. Go ahead, Paul. You want to come up to the mic, Paul?
No, I'll step aside.
Or a mic?
Hang on, Dave. I'm going to refer to council too here. Well, when you're discussing capital in this scenario, I don't think the statutes get into capital versus operating. The statutes get into special articles and operating budgets. The operating budget has an annual cycle of the fiscal year, whereas a special article is a more of a project accounting until the job is done. So, in my opinion, and again, that's why I refer to council, if you wanted to, you could, A, go forward as is presented, with the understanding that you're going to lease the amount, and that amount can subsequently be transferred at another point in time. If it's decided not to transfer it at some subsequent point in time, at June 30th, we would close it out to the Capital Stabilization Fund. Or, if you so desired, you could actually reduce, as you were talking about, reduce the amount that is for the truck, for the purchase of the truck, identify the lease amount, and let's say it's $42,300.
Is that what it is?
No, I'm just using it as
You
an
don't-
example. I'm using it as an example. If that lease was $42,300, you would then have $128,000 extra that you could allocate
Right.
amongst the rest of it.
Right, and I think that's what I was saying, Paul.
Right. I do not believe that you could reintroduce an additional capital item, all of a sudden saying that you want to buy a different truck. I think that would be outside of the motion to introduce an additional capital item, but you could reallocate the amounts.
I guess, Paul, my question is, if we allocate money, transfer money to the capital stabilization fund, which is what we're doing, can we pay lease payments out of the capital stabilization fund?
You cannot make any payments directly out of the capital stabilization fund. It would have to be appropriated into an additional account, a separate special article.
So my comment that says, we ought to, if we do intend to lease this truck, we need to increase the line item for DPW in the operating budget by at least what we believe the cost of that.
I believe you
lease
could
will
leave
be.
this as a special article for the DPW dump truck with the understanding that it's going to be leased as opposed to purchased. That it would be a special article identifying this as a lease as opposed to a purchase.
But the-
Special article on a future town meeting warrant. I mean, there's no-
Why-
I mean, the warrant is passed.
I understand that, but with the motion being, having the lease in there,
Richard?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, to me, this is a fairly straightforward matter. The first point I would make, Richard, you're going to have to stand up here and explain this.
Yeah.
Heaven help you, if it's written the way it is now.
I have
I was
to,
just going to say the same thing. I mean, I don't want to sound like an old man, but I've been to a few of these meetings, and if you go through anything on Tuesday that is anything like the exercise that you've been going
Right.
through now, it's
Right.
not going to be pretty.
So
I'll
the
be
point,
struggling for a quorum.
so you can't, we can't have something, well, we're going to include it, but then we're going to accept it. I mean, we have to do exactly what Mark was saying about increasing the operating budget.
that.
And to me, the thing to do would be to simply amend the amount on sidewalk reconstruction to take up the difference between the 162,300 and the anticipated amount of the lease payment.
Well, that's an area that we took money out of.
Right, and we had a
took money
big
out.
discussion. I was a big pusher of more pavement, more sidewalk reconstruction to get it up to what the recommendation was, what we need to be doing so that we're not more in deficit. So I don't think changing the amount on the sidewalk reconstruction would take us outside the warrant, right?
No.
I mean, that would be a very minor matter.
Well, I'm sure the warrant said greater or lesser.
Yes, it
sum.
does.
Yeah.
It would be up to the moderator to decide whether that
There's,
deviation is material enough that it would be outside the scope of the article.
and there's no need to file an amendment for sidewalk reconstruction in this article, because you do that ahead of time. This article, as it is now, informs the town. That's what the article is for. It's perfectly within your right as the select board to change any article, any amount in the motion that you want. It's just so that town meeting knows what you're doing. So it doesn't require an amendment to the budget, because the budget hasn't been moved and seconded by then. So when you announce your budget, you wait for a second, and then your motion's in play. But until then, you can assign any figure that you want, so long as it's the measure that's before the town meeting, and so long as it concerns what the article is all about. It's within the
Yeah,
scope
this
of
makes more
the
sense.
article. And remember that the scope of the article is a very liberal one. It's not constrictive, it's expansive. That's the way the scope of the article is
That makes sense.
traditionally looked at.
Right. So we would take the 160 and drop it down to whatever we wanted, or whatever the amount was, and just
It's
add
option.
it. That's simple.
That's within the
And I guess,
scope
Stephen,
of
the
the
question is, what do we think, what are we very comfortable with that will cover the police costs. I mean, it's
I'd have to look back at,
$50,000.
I'd have to look back at last week's packet, but the report was in there that had the
Right. I've got
thing in
that.
there.
Was it 60,000?
No, it was less than that.
It was
Yeah.
less than that.
Had to be-
Richard,
Mhm.
I'd like to make a motion to that effect. So I would move that we
Mark, I'll look it up.
Okay.
change the operating budget to be increased by the anticipated lease amount.
Can we hold this off till we get a dollar amount to put in
Oh,
this
is he-
motion, Alex?
Can he find it?
He's gonna find it.
Okay, all right.
Are we even worried about putting it in the operating budget, or leave it right here?
The lease
Those
numbers-
are options. In my opinion, they're options that you could do either or.
Okay.
But Paul, the lease number needs to be in the operating budget so we can start paying the lease before we have a,
And that's where I think we disagree, because I think you could have a special article that allows you to
but
lease
not
it.
on this warrant, according to town
Okay,
council.
if,
No, I haven't, there isn't a warrant article that talks about that. And I mean, you can.
What does
You
the-
can change the
I mean,
number.
Paul, if we have cash flow to get us through till the fall town meeting, I'm okay with that. Just pay the lease, and then at the fall town, the problem is if it doesn't pass the fall town meeting,
Right.
we got problems. But
So you're talking about increasing DPW general fund by 50,000?
whatever
Wherever
Steve,
you might.
yeah.
The rate he got was like 16.2, so I would say
Yeah.
like 18,000,
18,000?
just in case.
For the,
Lease, for the seasonal lease.
Okay, Paul wants the floor. Go ahead.
Okay, first of all, we can argue till the cows come home about violating the policy, because we do that on a regular basis by granting
We
exemptions. The issue is, if you go back to the fall town meeting just 6 months ago, we expended $700,000 on capital items that were not part of the capital budget at the annual town meeting last May. So we've exceeded more than the dollar amount that you're looking to cut here, and we'll do the same thing in the next fall town meeting. The discussion is, where does the money belong, as opposed to whether we're leasing or buying. If we're going to lease it, then it belongs in the operating budget for that dollar amount. I don't see what the issue is in reducing the capital item, or capital dollar amount by the $18,000, and even if you want to round it to 20, moving that, amend the budget by $20,000 on the floor of town meeting and leave the money in capital for a future discussion. I'm not going to vote on sidewalk maintenance tonight, because we haven't talked about it. Tonight, I mean. You know, we haven't talked
We
about
won't
it.
have another
Right.
official meeting between now and the floor.
No, but that money can remain in the capital stabilization fund, the $142,000, and then it can be decided by this board whether we want to leave that blank until next year and let it roll forward to a project, or address another project.
Won't that, Paul, won't that turn into free cash at that point?
By the fall town meeting, we
no,
can
we'll turn
expend
it,
it on a
this is all FY16
Right.
stuff,
So, I
so,
mean, when it rolls up.
yeah, if it rolls up and it's just closed out.
But
it
that's
could.
if we don't decide to do
That's
something.
right,
between now
but you would
and
have the option of transferring or let it roll and go with
Right.
FY17 free cash.
then. Right, but if we, between now and then,
Yeah, you
next
can make an
May,
appropriation from that source.
we can have a
Yes.
fall, and so the
You
next
can
question I have for
reappropriate.
council is, this isn't a capital budget. And as the moderator said, this is guidelines that are the scope of the article is liberal.
It is.
So if we reduce this this capital line
So
item,
we're
or,
talking about Article 4. We're back on Article 4.
Mhm.
Okay.
correct.
right, so if we reduce the capital expense by $20,000 to move into the operating budget,
So
does this,
you-
okay, if there was a determination to spend that money on something else, are we allowed that under the scope of the article? So if,
And I would say yes, and I'm sure the moderator would agree. I mean,
Yes.
the $20,000 is, just a minor deviation, and given the fact that the warrant said greater or lesser sums,
okay.
I mean, if the moderator asked me, I'd say you could do it.
So I'd like to
Thank
make
you.
my motion now. So the motion would be to change the line item in Article 4 for sidewalk reconstruction from $251,100 to $395,400, which is an increase of $144,300, and then to increase Article 3 for the DPW budget by $18,000.
Second.
Could you repeat the two first numbers?
Yes, to increase the sidewalk reconstruction from 251,100 to 395,400, which represents an increase of 144,300, and then to increase the DPW line item in Article 3 by $18,000.
I mean, just as a matter of procedure, Article 3 would have been voted on by the time you get to Article 4.
Right, so that's why when he reads it,
When he reads Article 3,
3, he'll have
he'll
increased.
increase it by 18,000
Right.
and then say, we're going to talk about this in the contract.
Yeah.
We'll rewrite the motions to reflect that.
Yeah. So the town meeting has not the budget that not the figures that you're changing here tonight. So in Article 3, make sure that you inform the town meeting what the changes are so that they're on the same page as you are.
Rich,
Go ahead.
Paul Pasturzek, a quick question. Our raise and appropriate doesn't change then, is that correct? Because we're still raising
That
and
is correct.
appropriating the same
In
amount.
total, it's the same amount.
We're just
between-
transferring less to the capital stabilization fund.
Right. Well, no, you are raising more in the operating and less in capital, but overall, they equate to the same amount as it was currently proposed.
But Article 3,
But these don't go to the capital stabilization fund, Mark. Okay.
Article 3, below the numbers, it will say, and to fund the general fund, okay, will that number then go up $18,000?
Yes, it will.
And the raise and appropriate that says 54,745, that'll go up $18,000.
Correct.
Okay.
Are you increasing the first item, general government? Are you increasing the Department of Public Works?
Department of Public Works.
General government.
That's where the change is going to take place.
That's
Right.
my understanding.
Yes.
Okay. But then, Article 4, that says raise and appropriate, that will go down by $18,000.
Correct.
The total raise and appropriate stays the same.
Correct.
Okay. The question is, and the motion on the floor now is to put that 144,300 into sidewalks or not.
That's a motion and second.
And the text below in Article 3, and the text below the lines, that amount of 54,740,599, at least that's the amount in the
Correct.
motion I'm
That'll
looking
go
at,
up.
that's going to have to be changed. That's going to have
Yes.
to be increased by $18,000.
Correct.
Any more discussion on the motion?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Paul.
I'm going to vote against the motion because I don't believe that sidewalk repairs are primarily the number one priority in the town. There's a forum tomorrow night to talk about a tax rate and about the impending crashing into a wall with our budget and our tax rate, and here we are going to make a decision in less than 5 minutes about how to spend $142,000. But I don't think sidewalks are the number one priority, and I think if you can save money and hold it back, then I think you can save money. As I mentioned, we spent $700,000 last fall that wasn't planned until we got up to the fall town meeting. And I'm sure we'll go through the same thing next fall, and we'll exceed the capital budget or the capital policy. Even though this may violate it, it will exceed it far and above. And I have no problems of moving that money over into the DPW to pay for the lease. I do have a concern of spending that $144,000 without giving more thought to it than this brief discussion.
Your point's well taken, but I also remind everyone that we cut this fund this year in negotiations. And I don't know what, I believe it originally was 400,000, am I correct, Mr.
Yeah,
Town
that's
Manager?
right.
I believe it was 400, and this committee in their negotiations cut it and took it back, and all we've done is reinstate it back close to what it should have been, or what was the original request. So I think the negotiations were in place, and we moved away from the sidewalks. We gave up the sidewalks, and all we're doing is putting them back in there. I'd be hard. We've got a well-established program on sidewalks. We got detailed analysis on where we need to walk, so that it's a functional program. It's not something we just dreamed up. DPW's got a good backlog program there. Any other discussions, Stephen?
If, hypothetically speaking, if the motion failed and we just redid it, somebody else, the motion that ended up going to town meeting floor was just to increase the operational budget by the 18,000 and then not levy for the 144,000. Could someone conceivably make a motion on town meeting floor to raise and appropriate that additional funds for those additional funds for
Sure.
another purpose?
Sure.
Well, but the moderator would have to decide if that's in order. And according, when Paul Pasturzik said a special article, our town council said coming up with special articles that are very different seem to be inappropriate or something like that.
Are
So
we on the same page with what you meant by a special article?
I don't know. What page are you on?
No, but when
Steve,
you're
I
talking about
understand what you're
special
saying.
article,
Yeah.
you mean a warrant article specifically addressing the truck or whatever it was?
Yes, and that's more of a project accounting where
Okay, but I mean, there is no such article on the warrant now.
it's part of 4.
Oh, okay, well, so that's fine.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about a special article in the sense of.
No. As a part of number 4, I was
Oh,
referring
okay.
to.
Oh, that's fine.
Do me a favor and, whatever you've finally agreed to here, let me look at the motion before you actually put it on the floor. And
Mike, the motion's going to look very much like Article 3
Yep.
with 3 numbers different. The line item that says, for Article 3, that says Department of Public Works General Fund, that'll be increased by $18,000. The raise and the general fund at the
Subtotal.
bottom and the raise and appropriate will each be up, and I assume one of them,
Yep.
I guess the others don't have to go up, Paul.
Well, the departmental budget for the Public Works is going to go up 18,000.
Right.
Now, then obviously, the subtotal for the general fund is going to go up 18,000, which is going to increase the grand total to 18,000. And then when we start reading, and the general fund, that 55,305 is going to go up to 18,000. And then in the same line, the 54,745.99 is going to go up 18,000. But it's all part of that one change of moving the 18,000 into the operating budget.
Here, I just want to confirm, so the amount that we're raising is the amount referenced in Article 3 plus the amount in Article 4?
It would be what's ever in Article 3 plus the 18,000.
No,
Where's
but
it?
Alex, the answer to your question is yes.
Okay, but do you understand what, I mean, we've got to raise the 1 point whatever million for all those capital projects, right? I mean, that's part of our budget.
Yes, that's part of your overall budget, yes.
Right, okay, so we're raising, right now it's at 1.3, it's 1.3 minus the 144,000. That's what that number's going to be.
No,
If
minus
that's
the
how
18.
If that's how the vote comes out,
Yeah.
yes.
Minus the 20, if
The
yours
18.
passes.
Well, the
Minus
one,
the
Minus
18,000.
18.
no, it's
It's-
minus 144. because-
What if you're putting it on sidewalks?
Oh, that's right, it's
Right,
staying the
'cause you-
same.
right.
Actually, that is
Yeah.
staying the same.
Right, with your
Okay.
motion, it would stay,
Right, right.
the total stays the
Doesn't stay the
same.
same.
So
Goes
the
down
point is that
18,000.
1.39,300
Mark,
will be raised through taxes.
Yes,
it's coming.
right.
Can I just ask? Sure. It's been mentioned that we cut sidewalks. What did we cut sidewalks for and spend the money on?
We shifted the money around, Paul.
To what?
I don't remember which project it
Well,
was. I mean, you were in the
all
meeting
the
too.
things that are there.
Yeah,
You know,
all the
I
things
mean,
that are
it's-
there. I mean, we
mean,
took the
you know.
recommendations and we
No,
covered the asphalt.
Was that not what was recommended to us, what's in the article?
No. No, this
It
was
was-
the sum total of our deliberations.
It was cut
Right.
down
So-
because of
I
the
mean,
other
yeah,
requirements.
I don't think the number $251,100, nobody picked that,
No,
it was.
It was 400 originally.
Right, that's kind of an odd number, and we did that to get down to a balanced budget.
Right, so what did we cut and put it into?
You don't have the figures here.
Well, it's.
We'd have to look at the meeting.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you'd have to look at all the things that we are spending it on, right? I mean, it allowed us to do the center school project and the
Right, so what
The
we
voting
did,
equipment.
right, so
and
what
all
we
this
did
other
is,
stuff.
and that's my point, so since no one can really remember it, my point is, what we did is we voted a prioritized list in the sidewalks that we cut, and I use that word cut because that's what was proposed and other projects were approved. It's not the word I would use because you were working on it, but the board prioritized that those were more important than sidewalks. The board never had a discussion and said, as soon as we get money freed up, that we would put it back in sidewalks. That's my point. And I think it's foolish to rush in and say, well, that money, we cut sidewalks and we put it there. There was a prioritization that the Center School playground was $70,000 more important than sidewalks. That other pieces of that article were more important than that group in the sidewalks. And since no one can really remember what we funded by not cutting it, I would just say, on that motion, approve the $18,000 in transfer, have a better discussion of what's important as you go forward, because I think that from the time we've done that list, I would imagine there's a couple things that have popped up that probably maybe take a little bit more priority than a sidewalk, and you can't get to it. $144,000 isn't going to make it any better, isn't going to make it any worse. It's going to be $144,000 of sidewalks. And I just think that the fear of saying we're going to go to town meeting and the fear of saying, well, we got to put it in and spend it because someone's going to make a motion is, anybody can make a motion. They can make a motion to cut sidewalk preservation and put it someplace else. So I don't think that's a reason to vote to spend the money.
Go ahead, Maria.
And I think we did have that discussion. I think, if I remember correctly, Alex was very disturbed that we had said we had a commitment to try to improve the sidewalks in town, which are very bad shape in some areas of town, in order to supply these other projects. In fact, we tried to cut different things. I know we had talked about, and we did cut down the replacement reserve, so this isn't just something that's coming offhand. And when it comes to capital projects, they are prioritized, they're placed before us, and then we have to do a delicate balancing act in order to come up with these numbers. One of the things that was said is, let's try to cut back on our costs in capital by going to the lease. We decided to do it with one truck, but I think the fact that we did discuss sidewalk reconstruction, and for 2 years now, we've said that is a priority in town, that we have to start investing in it. We set up a policy to say that we're just pulling this as a rabbit out of our hat. No, I think we've had long discussions on it in regards to policy. Now, when you talk about wanting to find a way to cut back on taxes and make savings, I think we have to sit down and that is something that needs a long discussion on the 4 or 5 different ways we're going to approach it and make that work. And I think that is something, we're starting the discussion tomorrow, and then we have to come up with a plan. But I think this fits very clearly in the negotiations we had during capital planning and budgeting. So I support the motion.
I just got one more thing. Alex, if you recall, what you were talking about was asphalt paving, not sidewalks, but if you can find it in me, and I'll stand corrected. And we don't have a policy towards sidewalks and asphalt. There's no policy. There's a capital policy, but there's no policy that says X number of dollars has to be spent on sidewalks and asphalt. So there is no policy. There's a capital policy. There's been discussions, and as I said, the discussion was about asphalt,
We
not
want
sidewalks.
recommendations from our engineering department on what their workload capacity is and what they can get done next year, and that's all
Understand.
rolled back up against an inventory. I mean, you're acting like we don't have any deficiencies in
I
sidewalks,
didn't say
Paul.
that.
We got several
Richard,
millions
you
of dollars.
You don't have to
for
try to put
deficiencies.
words in my mouth, because I never said
But,
that.
no, I say you're saying this is
You're
not
right, you're-
important. I
I
think the
didn't say it.
sidewalks are extremely important.
You know, that's not what I said. What I said was, what we had a discussion at that time was to say that we said a center school pavement program was
Right.
more important than sidewalks. So there were a number of things that this board voted on that were prioritized over sidewalks. And when you free up $144,000, you might have that same discussion and come out with another set of projects that need to be done that are more important than sidewalks. What we're saying here tonight is there's $144,000 freed up we want to put in the sidewalks. So we're not even looking at the other list that was presented to us for capital as to whether those are more important than sidewalks.
Well, we know this was cut, though.
It was discussed and prioritized to be more important
Right, this fund was reduced, though. The request was...
by the
for-
board after discussion and
Right.
debate that it was
Okay.
not as important.
Right.
And actually, Richard, I just wanted, I don't know if you guys remember, but I had done some written motions during our deliberations. And actually, one of the
Yeah.
things that I did talk about was trying to reallocate money from Chapter 90 funds into sidewalk reconstruction, and then some money that we could find in the police vehicle is going to be increased to sidewalk reconstruction. But the problem was we still couldn't get there, because of everything else.
Oh, you could put the police car back.
Yeah, don't start trouble, Steve. Any other discussion?
No.
All in favor? All opposed?
Rich, can I just want to go through what I have for Article 4 now. I think we went Article 3 just so people understand what it's going to say, and we agree. So the way I see Article 4 is it will now say, I move the town vote to raise and appropriate and transfer from available funds the following amounts for the purchase of capital projects listed, with the deletion of the purchase of the DPW highway dump truck with plow for $162,000, and that any remaining amounts from capital projects be returned to the capital stabilization fund. And you can then read the list, or for each item, deleting that DPW truck, and then we increase the sidewalk reconstruction to $395,400 based on the motion, and increase the subtotal, or decrease the subtotal by $18,000, so it now reads $1,372,300.
All the heads are shaking?
Sounds right to me.
Okay.
When you get to the DPW highway dump truck with plow, it's going to be $18,000.
No, it's going to be
Yeah,
zero.
zero.
It's not going to be, the itemization won't even be read
Yeah.
Right.
in that. It'll be mentioned in the heading.
And so then the motion on the top won't even talk about the lease.
We'll not
No,
talk
it
about-
has to, because it's printed. It's printed with that DPW truck in there, and I think that because the distributed warrant had it in there, I think we owe it to the people of the town to say, it's not as you see here, we're deleting it, and oh, by the way, when I read it, I'm not going to include it. That was the reason I put that in there, the deletion of it.
I think in what you read, the word lease was not in what you had just read.
Doesn't say lease at all,
Right,
because
exactly.
that's not part
It
of it.
will be deleted, yes.
Okay.
Sorry, but that wasn't clear to me.
Okay. Any other discussion? Article 5 is okay? No problems on anything else?
No,
After
most
that,
of
all
these
the others
are
are pretty
community
straightforward.
preservation fund projects. I will say this to the board. This year I've received some calls about the order of some of the articles, or one article, and it has to do with our senior citizens in town, and sometimes the place on the warrant that the senior citizens receive. As you know, we have Article 24 that relates to the senior citizens. Now, senior citizens, some of them, wish sometimes for their articles to be placed further up, closer to that portion of the warrant, that they're not last. Somebody has to be last, we know that. But I know that it came up last year with the request for a new senior center. Something for the board to consider. You determine the order of the articles. And
It's a citizen's petition, Mike.
I
That's why
understand
it's citizens' petitions have always come last, and it's not because of any other reason, in my opinion.
However,
There could be a motion to advance the article, but that takes a 2/3 vote.
that's right. And that's what I've been, there was a sort of a possibility that such a motion would be brought to the town meeting, but I don't believe that it would be necessary here, because we have the budget to consider, and we have a lot of community preservation articles to consider, and we have 24 articles and not the usual 42 that we get for the annual town meeting, so I don't think that's a real issue, but sometimes, you know, whether it's a citizen's petition or whatever, it affects a group of people in town. I'm simply speaking as moderator and some of our town meeting members that have to get home. And I know everybody wants to go to the town meeting, vote, and get out of there. We all know that. But something for the board to consider.
Yeah, just another article here, Mike. I have been,
Before we move on, can we address what he was just saying?
Go ahead. No, I wasn't gonna address that. Go ahead. No, I
Go
wasn't.
ahead, yeah.
Were you going to address that?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's up to the moderator on whether, I mean, it's not a board decision. My understanding, if someone brings up that motion on the floor, it's up to you whether you...
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's simply, you know, I don't think that it was necessary, but not, you know, if somebody wants to bring a motion to advance the article, as Dave has mentioned, it requires a 2/3 vote. It's amendable, it's requires a 2/3 vote, second required, and so forth. So there are articles that, you know, somebody has to go last. We know
But Mike,
that.
it wasn't malice. I mean, we have a practice of citizen petitions going last, and in the order in which they are submitted to the town clerk. So if we have multiple citizen petitions, they get listed in the order they're submitted to the town clerk. You know, within the top ones that are ours, yeah, we have some flexibility, but that doesn't apply here.
Cal?
So, recall in the fall town meeting that there was a desire, I can't remember which it was, I think it was the Quint truck. People wanted to move it up, or there was something that wanted to be moved up. And you exercise your discretion not to allow that. And I was just wondering, sort of, is that a discretionary decision on your part to allow or not allow such a motion to go forward?
It's never my discretion to allow any motion that's legally or procedurally brought to the floor. I have no choice.
Wasn't it, I have a pretty clear recollection that somebody wanted to move it up and you said no. No? Okay.
I don't know.
If I did it for reasons which I thought were sufficient.
Well,
but I don't-
I'm not, to me, I guess my comment on this is, everybody wants to get home. I mean, people with young children are trying to get back to babysitters, and, you know, to me, to try to say, you know, one group of people, you know, in favor of one type of article versus another, you know, is kind of a, I don't know how far you get with that.
I don't know where the policy started that citizens petitions will go at the end. Where'd it come from?
For years.
The years and the policy of the
Just
select board.
not a policy, it's just a routine.
Well, it's a routine. I don't think it's written anywhere, but it's just by habit.
Because I've never seen it.
Right.
Because the theory is you conduct town business at town meeting, and the petitions are brought up by citizens to be addressed after you
There's
discuss
certainly
town
nothing in the
business.
selectman's manual that addresses
This
it.
board does a great job, period. This board does a great job, always has. So don't
Yeah. But I mean,
misconstrue.
I don't know why they go at the end. It's just.
But I'm saying, you know,
Well,
it's,
Well,
It
Mr.
could-
Moderator, maybe the answer is for you to keep the show on the road so that old people and young people are home by 9:30.
I'll second.
well, at least for one more town meeting. in Dover.
Yes. And I want to say, you've been doing a great job, too. Thank you
Go
for all
ahead,
your
Al.
years of service.
So, Mike, just a quick comment. Article 23, which is, it has to do with a bylaw change on the process of billing for setting rates for water rates. I'm led to believe that there's going to be some discussion about that.
Article 2?
Article 23.
Excuse me, okay.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
And I guess my point with you is that the issue ought not be getting into what the water rates are or how the water rates are set, but rather the article, which simply gives an option for potential ways that the water rates might be set. Because I think that without that, the discussion might tend to go astray and start talking about water rates when in fact there have been no discussions at all about water rates at all. This is simply a bylaw change that would allow the select board to potentially consider other ways of setting water rates.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up, because I know that Mr. Friedman, who's a very well-known, longtime town meeting member, has called procedurally about a PowerPoint presentation. Now, I haven't seen it. I have not looked at the content. We've had some general discussions, giving him no more than 10 minutes to do his PowerPoint presentation, and strictly construing that. But you know, all this new technology that you get that is on the outside isn't, you know, it happens within the town meeting every year when we have our own budget. We do a PowerPoint.
I'm not questioning that, and
So-
he has the right to request a PowerPoint for you.
I
But I just
understand
ask
that.
that you make the comments to the issue and not discussing water rate setting, because that's not what it's about. It has not, there's not a dollar in here, there's not a rate in here, there's no implication. It's just a bylaw change strictly of, will you allow the select board to modify the way in which water rates are set? Period.
I understand that,
Okay.
but I'm going to let him put the presentation on, and then he'll be subject to questions, and it's the regular form of debate which any town meeting member in this town has the right to. Now, that isn't to say that everybody has a right to put a PowerPoint presentation in as part of their discussion of opposition or in favor of a motion, but I think with Mr. Friedman, he's always kept his word in the past. He's a very well-known and very well-respected member of our town, and I would certainly want to give Mr. Friedman all of the latitude that I can, simply because he's been a member of this town for so long, and he's done it in the past, and he's well-respected by me.
Go ahead, Mike.
There's going to be a 10-minute PowerPoint presentation. I vote in favor of support of the citizens petition being able to be, because I think if they're held to the end and all of a sudden they see a PowerPoint, it could be a bit
I
of a
understand
disruption in the audience. So, you know.
I haven't put out any general bids for PowerPoints. He simply happened to call me. He asked me about the procedural aspect of it, and within the procedural part of it, without going into any of the detail, whether I'm in for or against, simply from a procedural standpoint. And that's the point that I wanted to make the board aware of.
Thank you.
So presumably, his PowerPoint will address why charging for water otherwise than by measure is inappropriate.
I haven't...
Or appropriate, he may be in favor of this.
But,
I mean, right?
I don't...
But if he strays, like, you know, I think we can assume the moderator will
Correct.
rein him in.
I have not looked at the content of such a PowerPoint. I'm simply saying to him, if you're going to do it, I'm going to hold you to this amount of time, and I'll cut you off. That's it.
Any other questions for the moderator? Thank you, Mike.
Mike, thank you for your...
You know, it's really been a pleasure to be this town's moderator. You know, I've been doing it for 21 years, and I've always said this, but, you know, for a lower middle-class kid out of the West Side to come over to this town with its history and tradition of fine moderators and its town meeting, it's been like hitting the lottery every time I've gotten up on that podium. So I really thank this town through you for everything that I've done for the town as its moderator, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. Congratulations.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Okay, we got some, we're going to get some motions for some minute approvals.
Find where these are.
I have some significant amendments. Just a comment, I sent to the, the select board clerk, I sent Rebecca too, and the chair, an extensive comments and corrections on the 3 sets of minutes that we have here. I know Mr. Grant also had some corrections on others. I'm more than willing to go through them now if people want to, but they're pretty extensive. And it's the chair's call. Or do you want to circulate those to the whole group and defer this for 2 weeks? So it's up to you.
I thought they had gone to everybody, they just went to me.
They just went to you. Last time I sent them to everybody, I got my hand slapped for violating open meeting laws, so I'm
Okay, well,
not sending them to
if they
everybody.
did, then the group usually doesn't want to vote on it until they see it. Is that still the flavor of the board, not to vote on it?
I haven't
until
seen
you
his
see it?
corrections.
Okay.
Right.
So,
But Rebecca, you make the corrections. I do have a note on the one correction, Alex, that you brought it in. I agree with what you put in there, but we need to finish that statement out,
okay.
because I did have a follow-through, and I'll get that correction to you also. Mr. Grant put one in. The statement didn't stop with what I said, that they wouldn't answer Mr. Grant. It continued on to where I said, this is what I would like to have done. So there was a follow-through.
Yeah, I guess in general, certainly the minutes of March 18th, which was a SOI presentation by the school committee and the school superintendent. One of my comments was there were a lot of comments where it said, it was noted that, and it didn't say who noted it, and in several cases, there was confusion over who noted it, and in fact, one could read that it implied that the wrong person or somebody different noted it from who actually commented on it, and I had asked that be clarified, whether it was Ms. Doyle, Mr. Clark, Ms. Robinson at one point, myself, or either, a couple other people on the select board, and I thought that was, at least from where I read it, it was necessary to note who commented on it. It was things like that.
Can I ask that, because I have some corrections that, since we're not going to do them, I was going to do them tonight, is,
Sure.
can we have the minutes with any track changes to the, so that, because I can send you mine, but if it's the same thing that Mark already addressed, then,
Right.
Do we want to send them to Rebecca, or
Yeah, I'd
do we
send-
send them to Debbie
I'll
House?
send them to Debbie, and she can kick them out, or you can send them to Debbie, and she'll put
Well, I've sent mine to
Debbie.
Debbie.
Send them to Debbie, and then she'll send out one email with all of the,
Right.
with everybody's
Right.
recommended edits.
well, that's what I don't want to see minutes that we approve with. I'd just like to see what the potential changes are, so that, because if Mr. Gold and I don't agree on what he thought was said, then I don't think that should be in the minutes to approve. I think if we can highlight, this is what the correction was.
Right.
Because we're not saying that your correction is the right correction.
Absolutely.
Right, or anybody's correction is the right
Then
correction.
send them to Rebecca, and she'll produce a master track
Okay.
change document.
Okay, got it.
So like everyone send their comments to me, and
Yep.
I'll include everyone's notations.
Okay.
And you'll know who is speaking. And then I'll send them all out.
Any more questions on the minutes? Okay.
Excuse me.
Town meeting motions, why is that on there, Steve?
Because we include them in the packet for discussion, but it seems like we've already just.
Yeah,
done
that's what I
that.
say, we already got that out of the way with the thing, okay. Town manager evaluation, new business. Last year, we had a rather joyful discussion on the town manager's evaluation. It sprung all over the place. This year, I think possibly the easiest way to do it is to have each select board member take the floor and go through your evaluation, or say what you would like to say to the town manager and for the camera. Then at the conclusion of it, then I believe that Stephen will have the right to come back after we've all made our statements and chat with us on it. Is there any different approach you guys would like to take on it? Seeing no different approaches, who'd like to start first? You want to just start, Marie?
Yeah,
Or start, who wants to start on it?
I guess I'll start.
Okay.
One of the things I had put in my thing didn't make the full thing was, I just sat down and made a list of what's happened this year. and what the town manager has done before I did my evaluation. And here's a list, I'd sort of like it to go in the packet, the year in review.
I made a mistake on that. I thought that was just some of your notes that you had used for doing your evaluation.
Yeah, no, it was, well, it wasn't really part of the evaluation, it was sort of like a basis of my evaluation,
Yeah,
so
that's why I didn't
I'll
include it.
pass that down. And anyone else who wants, you know, put that at the end in case he wants it, yeah.
To
Just,
Paul?
yeah. No, to our resident. He gets one too. Here. So there's a lot, it's a 2 pages. I mean, there must be anywhere from managing the historic snowfall to discussing the transition of 3 department heads. It's been a very, very busy year. And I tried to take that in consideration as I did my evaluation. And the other thing that I did was I tried to, in the middle of my evaluation, decide where we're going forward in evaluations. So I talked about performance, and then I had recommendations for next year. And so some of these sections I feel really don't belong anymore in evaluation, and I really would like to see evaluations change. I think that we should do our evaluations in regards to goal setting, on where our goals were met last year and our goals next year. And goals are not a static thing. And so I tried to pull from what I felt that really we had talked about as goals, and that was the feelings on the board, whether it was complainings about the visibility, you know, standards in town, of garbage being left around, of unsafe conditions around the streets. And I really feel all of the complaints that we've had going for the past 4 years that I've been on the board really have started to settle down, and I see more professionalism in town. I see things more organized. We're seeing standards, as Richard would say, put in place, procedures put in place, and I really feel comfortable with the way things and the trends that we're going in. I'm very pleased with that, and a lot of the things that I was concerned about, I'm seeing they're getting done. Whether it's the new website, the Facebook page being begun. I really got excited about the communication with the residents around building projects so they could hear what streets are being shut down, when there are problems with gas leaks, how you can handle it. And as I said in my evaluation at one point, when you look at the Merriweather, well, first of all, you look at Maple Street project, and then you see Merriweather. Merriweather is when you came on board in the middle of the project and how you really got hands-on and started to move that. And then you look at Dwight Road, and Dwight Road also was a bear of a project. I mean, the gas leaks, everything else that was going on because of our aging infrastructure, but it's beautiful. I mean, the curbs are being put in place. There was no safety issues. There were no complaints in regards to the traffic. So I really feel like we're moving in the right direction. And right now, we're at every time we come up to something, whether it's the MGM negotiations, we all, as a board, struggle in which direction we're going to go. It's a little messy. We all struggle on where we're going to go with it. But then once the decision's made and we start going, it gets done. And I'm really pleased with the way things are at the end of negotiations. I mean, I personally was there in the middle of those negotiations with MGM, and I knew how difficult they were and how you really led us through some really tight spots and brought us to where we were in success. And when I see the trash contract that we've been working on, and even in today's notes, when you're saying, all right, we have this contract coming up with Bondi's Island, and you're not just looking about, well, where we are now, you're looking at the historic view and saying, yeah, but is this the right place to go? And I see that professionalism, whether it's the Verizon contracts, whether it's the wireless, and that you're not going to accept something, you really are going to do battle. So even though you do battle with us sometimes, I really feel like you're our bulldog. And when it comes down to it, we can point you in the right direction and you'll fight for the town. And I personally feel that we've seen increase in revenues on some of those contracts you're fighting, and you're not going to spend the money. If you feel there's a way of not spending the money, you act like it's your money. You have this real commitment to town, and I appreciate that. I know the last year it was a little rough. but I feel like we're starting to blend, we're starting to work a little bit more as a team, which is important. And as they say, it's messy making sausages at time, but the final product I've been really pleased with. I put a lot of recommendations under every single section because there's always places that we can improve, the next step in moving. My view is that when we evaluate you, we evaluate ourselves. And we need to see what we've done right and what we've done wrong. But I say this is the second year of the contract, and I've been really pleased in the direction that we're going. And I think that a lot of the problems that I was concerned about in town, I feel a little more confident about. So I want to thank you for that. And so the year in review, I think, is a good way of just getting an idea of what we've occurred this year, and maybe we can also use that for the next step is when we do our goal setting of what we would like to see in goals of the way of town, as well as goals for the town manager. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, is that it? Mark?
I get the pass.
Pardon?
I don't get the pass.
No, I was gonna pass over me and had a meeting.
I looked at this year, also tried to compare it to last year. Obviously, the things that stick in my mind the most are the issues that didn't go smoothly. Clearly, the things that go well, we don't hear about, we don't see about. I know that last year, one of our issues was communications. I think that, from my perspective, the communications has only improved marginally, and I say that because I went through this, and in my written statements, there are, I believe, far more examples than what I've given. But the one thing that kind of struck at me, that there's still a difference between us, and we're not working as a team yet with the select board and the town manager, is that I found out about the retirement of our police chief through the periodic biweekly message that came in our select board packet. I would think that when a major department head retires, even if it's on a Thursday afternoon or Thursday morning, and we're getting our packet later that week, and it wasn't even that situation here, it's worthy of a separate email message or phone call or whatever. And that was just one example of where I think that our communications remains formal, stinted, and not the informal, kind of here's what's going on kind of thing that I think we still need and to some degree have expected. I also, just kind of going through the items one by one, looked at the multiple items that we're working on. That was clearly under communications. That falls under maybe service and support to the select board and other things. There were times when we got information a little bit later than we should have, the day of the meeting. Didn't get information. There were items that indicated that there wasn't formal information, probably could have been. So I didn't think that went as well as it might have. Clearly, budget preparation and administration sat on the finance subcommittee. I think we had some good back and forth with the budget preparation and administration. I think whether it's under budget or the capital plan, I was still disappointed that the select board never really got a copy of the formal capital plan until the day of the budget review. In general, we'd been getting it, and I thought we had come to expect to get it at the time that the capital planning commission or capital planning committee got the capital budget or capital plan, and that really was not that we're going to act on it, but it's still part of the communications thing of keeping the select board informed and in what's going on. So I think that was certainly an issue for me. I've rated the town manager at various levels throughout. I think we had 10 items, and my ranks ranged from a 1, which was in the communications areas, to a 4 in one of the areas that we have. So there are areas that we're doing, I think we've done a lot better in and doing well in. Maria, I agree with you that there are areas that I'm not sure I felt qualified to judge appropriately. Part of that is a concern to me, I think. clearly, if we're being asked to judge the town manager on his managerial skills and how he's managing other people with personnel considerations and privacy considerations and that kind of stuff where things probably rightfully aren't shared with us, it's very difficult to judge the town manager on something like that when we don't really see anything but some of the downsides and things like that. So I agree that that's problematic, and we may want to change how some of these items are discussed. I think that again, there was that whole area of human resource management, and my comments started out by saying I'm only vaguely aware of the actions having to do with HR issues throughout the town. And believe Mr. Crane's actions meet our expectations in these areas, because it really is that kind of a situation. In terms of relations with media and the community, I think that, to be fair, I'd rank that as bimodal. And I'd say that because I think our Mr. Crane and the town's relationships with the media have been actually good. I think it's great that we get the recognition that we deserve and get our chance to put our say in front of the general population. And I know our town managers works hard to make that happen, and it shows. I think, though, that the relations with the community have been mixed. I think that there are certainly elements of people in the community who have had issues, who are concerned about the way the communications took place. Whether they're right or wrong, or fair or unfair. I think that it's their perception, and I think it's important that we acknowledge that there are people who are concerned about the way communications took place, whether it's because Mr. Crane tried to do things that it turns out he was unable to do, or we didn't let him do it, or the town, he was unable to do it because of regulations or laws or whatever it was. I think that what we heard a lot from the community is that there were issues that needed to be better addressed. The other item was on goal setting and achievement. Marie, I somewhat repeated or stole from you, or didn't even know what you're doing, but I said, my comment, and I'll read it, it says, this is a case where our failure is his failure in terms of achieving some of the things that we had on our goals that weren't achieved because we didn't elucidate the goals as well as we might have early on. Although we have goals, and clearly there's a laundry list, as I indicated, of things that were addressed, and I think you did a good job of in fact, you sent us out that list, Marie, just now. You gave us that list of things that were addressed. I think there's also a long list of items that weren't addressed that might have been. And I think there are an equal number of things that were addressed that may not have been on anybody else's designated or demonstrated priority list. And I put that as very specific as things like a regional dispatch center, which I know is something that the town manager is very active in doing and interested in doing, and we've yet to find out whether there's going to be a lot of support from the select board to go down that road as it gets down toward the end. The area of relations with federal, state, and other government units, I rank the town manager as quite high, I think above meeting expectations. Because of the work that was done on many of the things, Marie, you talked about. I kind of put MGM into the last year's category, and this year's category, though, was work with the state DOT on the Route 91 and all its things there, the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission and some other things, and I think that deserves the recognition that it's earned. And finally, a couple of the other areas of asset management. I am concerned a little bit still about asset management. My rating was meeting expectations, and I think my write-up, rather than go through the details here, describes what I'll call the good and the need still needing to be worked on asset management there. Like I said, I really didn't intend to sit here and read my performance review entirely, so I'll let the comments speak for itself. And finally, there was the area, I guess, of that I want to talk about with dealing uncertainty and changing conditions and I guess I'm concerned about that one a little bit. Clearly, I'm just about meeting expectations, but I think my write-up will speak for itself on some of the issues that I tried to identify that were the not as good, but some that were good. And in general, I think we're making progress versus last year. I'd like to see progress be a little bit more smooth. I think we still are in a situation where I'm not convinced the communication is as open and free as it ought to be. I'm certainly not convinced that we're working as well as a group of 6 individuals that we could. So I have some concerns, but as you can see from my rankings, like I said, not everything was a 5, not everything was a 1. In fact, there were, there was everything and everywhere in between, and I'm glad that I took the time to go through that to that extent and rank what I believe to be fairly with, I hope, examples that we can all look at and move on from for next year.
Paul?
Thank you. Excuse me. First, I guess, what you look at is that perceptions or reviews are based on everybody's perceptions and your interactions. And, I look at the review again, and I'm disappointed in a couple things. One is that the board didn't follow through on the performance management schedule that we had and to help the town manager improve in the categories that we specifically outlined and gone through the 10 of them. Not that perhaps we may not have gotten through all 10, but we probably would have had some progress in some of these. And we can go into specific examples, and I know that's what's been done. And my review is my review, and I'll stand by what my perception is and what my review is. And if I have to give specific examples, and that's fine, I'll do that. But I'm just disappointed because I still have that feeling of that the town manager's invoking the charter and doesn't see the need to work with all of us equally, I think, is at least my perception. And I think there's a better way to do this, and I agree. I don't believe this review is, and I said that at the beginning, that there's probably some things that we should have changed in given reviews. But so if you don't know something's going on, then you don't know whether it's being done or not. And I really believe that if there is something that's going to come out of this, and whatever comes out of it, if there is some things that we want to try to improve, is that we actually stick with it and follow through so that we can actually agree on this, agree on everything being in an improved state. And quite frankly, I think that we probably should have had that discussion prior to doing the review and what we thought we should have done. And because I think that overall we have failed in a sense of getting that cohesion that we're trying to, that people keep saying that we need to do and we should do. And I don't see it. And I think in the last year, I may have had one phone call with the town manager, and it was over an issue that something was happening in town, and I got a phone call instead of an email or something, because there was something that was going on, and I can't quite recall what it was, but it was an emergency, but it ended up turning out not to be bad or anything. But so in the course of a year, I don't know if that's communication or not, so I'll stop at that.
Okay. Alex?
I guess in approaching this, I guess the two issues that seem pertinent to me for our discussion is sort of big picture, what is the overall evaluation of the board, and what the difference is between last year and this. And then the second question is, where do we go from here, which is probably even more important. And in looking, so I went back over last year's evaluation, and frankly, I think the evaluation's pretty similar, except Richard's, which was markedly different. And so last year, I think the overall score was around a 2. This year, the overall score is 2.92, which is a little bit below meeting expectations. And I guess the thing that I've failed to see is what the dramatic difference is from last year. So, in some areas, Richard's rating went from 1 to 5.
Is the discussion of Richard or of our town manager's
I'm
performance?
talking about.
Well, the discussion's the town manager performance, not how.
I'm talking about
I will
that.
explain my rating when it gets to that time.
Well, I guess what I'm getting to is that some of the things that you said, Richard, last year, I think still apply.
Okay.
So, for example, in one of the,
Are you quoting what I said or what you've said, sir?
I'm quoting you.
Why would you be using my evaluation of the town manager for last
Richard-
year for somehow your evaluation of the town manager this year? I don't understand it, Alex.
Okay.
I-
I'm trying. Can I speak?
Yeah, I guess
Do
you
I
can.
have
I just
the
don't
floor?
understand your approach.
Okay. So one of the things that you said last year was, and this is in relationship to the Quint truck, Stephen was given very specific directions on setting up a donation account, and he failed to act on this issue until it was too late to be of any benefit this year. Instead, he devoted energy towards attempting to gain approval of a $750,000 budget item after the issue had already been resolved by the select board. Okay. And you gave him a 1. And I guess what I would say is, I'm with you last year, because on that specific point about the Quint truck, we still, that donation account was, that effort was sort of left at the edge. It never really was followed up on the way that we intended it. So I guess what I'm saying is that the things that you saw, other people saw last year, I'm still seeing. So and what I'm failing to see is what is the dramatic difference. And I'm not even sure Stephen would claim that he's dramatically different from last year to this year. On one of the rating performances, asset management, Richard, you said, this is your first sentence, my opinion is that Stephen has totally failed in this performance element, period. So I guess where I am is sort of somewhere between where you were last year
Okay.
and this year.
Did you see the document we gave out tonight? This is asset management. This is asset management right here. It's a pretty sizable increase, and everybody asks for details, and the details are presented, and we act like they're invisible. But
All right. I mean, I'm just trying to explain. So I guess what I'll do is I'll just and I wrote a number of things in the written evaluation. I won't try to read them all. I mean, one thing that was a particular concern to me was, we voted to increase the hours at the adult center. I thought that was really important. And I went back and looked at the tape just to make sure I was remembering it right. And I remember having a very specific conversation last year about with the town manager, about how increasing the adult center director's hours was going to allow people not to be waiting outside at 9 o'clock. And then I find out that didn't happen. And when I see things like that, I think the way I put it was, it makes me feel that I was sold a bill of goods. And frankly, that isn't even that important to me personally. It's important to me as a public official. I don't go to the adult center, but there are people who do, that really would have benefited from those increased hours that we voted for. And so I guess that's the concern that I have, is that we have situations where the town manager acts contrary to what the select board has voted on. One of the other things that I mentioned in the written evaluation was that I think the town manager's approach to capital planning, where he will not look at anything beyond 5 years, which by definition is everything that's big. We've in order to come up with a way to finance all our capital needs, we've got to have that longer time horizon. We've discussed it many times. Town manager doesn't want to do it. One of the things the interim town manager said before he left was, we don't have a capital plan. In the sense, we don't have a capital financing plan. But there will be a new town manager, and that town manager will do that. And I think we're 2 years on, and we're pretty much the same place. So that's the problem I have, when it comes to capital, is when we vote on things, just like we did today, we vote for something, but we also vote no at the same time, every time we make a choice. But what we're deprived of is understanding what it is that we're saying no to. And I think that puts us in a position where we really can't serve the community the way we ought to. So, I'll read the first part of my evaluation because it goes to the second point, which is where do we go from here? So I said, at the time of his evaluation last year, the town manager was 1 year into a 3-year contract. Although his performance was rated very low by a majority of the select board, I believe that all of the issues could be addressed and resolved because they were mostly rooted in the town manager's outlook and attitude. Prior to that, and after that evaluation, I offered to meet with the town manager. He never said yes. He never said no, and he never said yes to that offer. A year later, we are 1 year from the termination of the contract. The issues remain, and the town manager has attempted to break the terms of his contract by seeking employment before the end of that contract. And after it became public that the town manager had not obtained the positions he was in the running for last fall, I stated that it would be best for the town if there was a mutual parting of ways, because the current situation leaves the town in a one-sided arrangement. The contract protects the town manager's employment during the 3-year term, and the town has little recourse if the town manager obtains employment elsewhere, with little notice due to the general reluctance of courts to order specific performance on the contract and the preference for injured employers to instead seek damages. So it's kind of a heads I win, tails you lose, except for we're on the losing end of this arrangement. So all of this leaves the town in the unfortunate position of being unable to plan for the transition to a new town manager, which is a process that takes a significant amount of time. And I believe now is the time to begin that transition. So that's, to me, is sort of where we go from here. And I guess the final point I would make is, we talked a lot about communication and getting information to the select board, and I guess the thing that's so important about that is we are the elected representatives. So if we're cut out of it, it doesn't just mean us as individuals, but the people are cut out. Because when we're elected, we're supposed to be held accountable for what government does. But if we don't even know what's going on, it's hard for us to exercise that responsibility, even though we're still accountable. One of the things that happened, when I got elected was you can't talk about government as they anymore. It's we. I've always believed that. You can't be part of government and then talk as if you're outside of government. And yet, it feels, in many ways, that's what's going on. And so, as a result, we have this, incredible form of democracy that we have at the local level, and we can't really see it through.
Okay, thank you, Alex. I'm last. It's been an intriguing year. I think for everybody that's listened to what's just been said in the last maybe hour, you can imagine the intriguingness environment that we deal in and how we get back and forth. I mean, I've heard the evaluations this year, and I've heard a mid-year where it sounded like they were evaluating the select board chair instead of the town manager. I think at that one meeting I offered up for a motion to reorganize if the board was dissatisfied. And again, I've seen a little bit of the telltale stuff sign up in here. We talk about communication. I can count on one or maybe both hands the amount of phone calls that I've had from members of this board in the last year, except for Marie. So when we talk about communications, we're not talking about just communication with the town manager. We're talking about communication of the whole board. You could say there's some systemic problems within even how we function back and forth as a team. Alex made several notions, we can't move forward if we can't do this, that, and the other. And I totally agree. We can't move forward as a team and display management and supervision of a town manager when we're not in sync unit within our own rights. I said before, I'll say again, I'll likely say it again 2 years from now, if I'm still around. I think it's humanly impossible to have one person have 5 supervisors. I can't imagine it. And if anybody and everybody in here has been in part of the workforce, you can imagine being able to satisfy 5 supervisors. It's impossible. I think we're kidding ourselves if we thought it's ever going to take place. And I think that's part of the game. You're always going to have 1 or 2 that maybe don't sink in. And the same percentage is going to be on the personalities. You got 16 known personalities in the world, and we got 5 members on this board. So there's undoubtedly chances are very good, one personality is never going to get along with this town manager. No matter what he does, it's impossible. They cannot communicate unless one of them totally gives up on their own backup styles and all and changes their behavior. And most people aren't going to do that in the pursuit of their careers. The rating system that we have is a 5-tier system. And you heard tonight grades going back and forth. The number 5, the instruction that was given to everybody, that's exceeds expectation. That's outstanding and superior performance can clearly be seen by anyone who observed the person's work. Pretty good statement there when you say the person's work. We witnessed to the greatest extent the town manager's work in this room when we have our meetings. We're not with the town manager during the day. We get reports, which he gives us from time to time. We get briefings, we get emails, but we're physically not with the town manager when he actually performs his duties, unless we're part of a task force that goes and works with him. The exception of that is the chair. The chair spends a considerable amount of time with the town manager. This year, Steve and I have met every week for 1 to 2 hours, and sometimes in excess of that, and that's a minimum. That much interchange has taken place between us. Contrary to some of the people saying that we didn't do this, that, and the other, we've spent a lot of time discussing performance-related items and how to best deal with the board, and what was the best approach to take with the board, realizing that there was not one approach that was going to gel with the entire board. But how did we win the most people over? And that's normal. That's the way it's going to take place. But I can tell you, Stephen has devoted a considerable amount of effort towards trying to improve how he interrelates with this board, how he communicates with this board, and the execution also of his duties. And I want you people to keep remembering, there's 5 different supervisors. He's got to keep 5 people happy during the day and communicate what each one of those fields is appropriate communication, in addition to running a 56, 57, whatever our $1 million budget is, with all the personnel management needs in it and meeting external meetings that he goes to. It's a large puzzle. There's no deputies in this organization. It's just a town manager, division chiefs, and everything else is on there. There's no in-between people that you can shift workloads to. The number 4 standard is between. It says between exceeds expectation and meets expectations. The number 3 is an interesting standard. That's a meet expectation standard. Performance fully meets the principal accountabilities of their associated goals and expectations. Basically, a level 3 employee is an employee that is doing what is required of the job. They're not exceptional, and they're not really goofing up that much. They're a normal employee. They're doing most of everything that you want done. The number 2 is meets expectations, and between meets expectation and not meeting expectations. This is an area where you're signaling that there is an area that the employee needs help in, or that you feel that there is some developmental needs. The level 1, not meeting expectation performance, is noticeably poorer than what the principal accountabilities and associated goals and expectations. Area deserves attention and calls for noticeable improvement. A level 1 rating is a failure. Make no doubt about it. There's no way to sweeten it. There's no way to change the intent. Level 1 ratings usually require immediate attention, or or you could face disciplinary action. It means a failure, total failure of how you're operating. I think we use this rating sheet quite loose. I think we take liberties with the ratings. I don't think we attach as much meaning as we need to. Alex has questioned me. He even questioned me mid-year, and he had it brought down to an exact day in October when I changed my mind about the town manager. And I did email back and forth with him, and I basically don't even remember what I said, but it's like, that's my judgment call. I make up my mind what I'm going to do with myself and how I'm going to grade an individual. Now, I clearly stated last year, and I think I said it publicly, that some of my evaluation, which I regret now, basically was to get Stephen's attention. There were some items that I felt we needed to get his attention on. It was that horrible first year on the job. There was an adjustment to 5 supervisors, and it's tough. There's an adjustment to the area, the family's adjusting. It's a terrible period of time to go through. I regret that I did it at that time because I can personally tell you he didn't deserve the grades I gave him on all items. I did it from attention. I wanted to get attention, his attention. So when I worked with him this solid year, of course I saw stuff differently. I was with him every day, or theoretically every day. I saw the stress periods he was going through and had more inside decisions and discussions with him. And Mr. Gold this year spent some time with Stephen in negotiations on trash contract. He's seen Stephen in a totally different light than some of the other board members have seen him in, because he actually saw him sitting at a table doing negotiation and team exercises. So each individual does have the right to give this man or any person up here any type of evaluation they want, and they base it up with however many colorful words you want. But I thought it was interesting that this is the second year of Mr. Crane's contract. Normally, in a contract or in a second year of employment, you would see grades go up. Individual grades by individual graders would go up, because that's 2 years into an employment in an organization. By that time, you should see improvements being made. You should not see scores going down from the first year of employment to the second year of employment, because I find it hard to believe that his performance is actually less than it was the first year, because he's settled in, his expertise is up, he's doing more things, he's taken on more duties. We had this report here. This was not even thought of before Stephen got here. Well, it was thought of, but nobody ever took action on this asset stuff. Like Marie said, there's a laundry list of stuff that's going on in this town right now that wasn't here 3 years ago. I can tell you from the capital side, there's a lot of stuff going on. The capital committees have melted together. The quality of the project is not even close to what it was 3 years ago. I don't think this happened without our town manager's input. It just didn't all of a sudden happen. He has to be nourishing these things along. There's been a lot of changes taking place in even our DPW division, that intolerance to some of the old habits that may not have been productive are no longer being tolerated. So we are making changes. He's never going to get credit for everything he does, because a lot of these things aren't brought out in the open. There's too many details. You can't. I mean, it's impossible to list all the details going on in one day. Could he communicate more? I don't need any more communication out of him, because I pretty well find out what I feel is important. But I don't have the same needs as maybe Mr. Gold or Mr. Santinello or Mr. Grant or Marie. I think Stephen has tried to find that sweet spot with everybody, and it sounds like he's been unable to hit it on the communication. So I can't tell Stephen how to communicate with this board, because I don't know what the magic cure is either. And I don't think this board, theoretically, together is capable of telling them what we would accept as communication, to say, if you do this, your grade will be a 4. I don't think we can. I don't think we have the abilities to be able to coalesce and make these statements and give them to this town manager for next year's performance. We can try if we want. I'm more than willing to try, because I think it's fair. It's the only way you can make it fair is to give expectations And then everybody's aware that everybody agrees at this table what the expectation is, instead of an interpretation. We had last year, I looked at some of the grades, and I'm not mentioning the grades or the names, so that doesn't matter. Last year, we had one of the members on the board, as 70% of the articles were marked as meeting expectation. This year, the same person only rated 40% of his meeting expectation. That means the town manager's slipping backwards. And I don't believe it. Nobody can show me any evidence that this is happening, but that was the perception. The rating individual lowered 50% of their grading elements from last year and only increased 20% of them. Again, why? I can't fathom why it's taking place. One rater last year gave 9 level 1 ratings. 9 level 1 ratings. And this year gave 7 one-level ratings, so it brought some up. But the rater has not, that rater has not yet rated the town manager at acceptable standards on any of the 10 performance standards. And it could go on. I don't know where to take it. There's something definitely wrong. I feel that for sure. I feel there's something wrong. But I don't think it's all with our town manager. I think it's how we deal with the town manager. And unless we can identify to this person exactly and precisely what our expectations are for performance, we're never going to function as a supervisory element or a management element for our town manager. Because he's out there guessing on what he have to do to make us happy. And I think it's highly inappropriate. We've tiptoed around the thing, and I still think our board has a lot of work to do. I think Stephen he's not an angel. I've told him this. We've had some rather warm meetings, but he has sincerely made an effort this year to improve his performance. And I think there's reasonably it should have been acknowledged by this board, and it does not appear to have been acknowledged. So maybe it's my failure. People want to blame me for stuff. I accept it. Pile on. I don't mind. You can blame me for that failure. I won't let it burden me down too much because I know it's not true. But I would ask everybody to do some soul searching on this. We've got a challenging year ahead. We've got 3 division chiefs getting ready to leave this town. And by comments made by Alex, it sounded like we're saying that this is the transition period of not approving the contractors or the town manager's contract after this year. I don't know if that's a statement this board wants to make, but I said that's what I read from what he said tonight. So I don't know where to take it from this. I just have to leave it. I rated the town manager considerably higher than I did last year. But I didn't give him all 5s. I didn't give him all 4s. But I did rate him considerably higher. And I think if somebody pulled me to task, I can show you why I did. I go back into my books. I've got piles of stuff at the house. I got mountains of the stuff. But anyway, I didn't interrogate anybody on their grades. I don't think it's my point to do it. And I don't appreciate anybody questioning my grades. That's all I got to say. Mark?
Yeah, I take your comments pretty seriously, Richard. As you say, you've been a little bit closer this year to the town manager than in the past. I guess the concern I have, and this take a look internally, is at what point do the raters, we're being the ones who are doing the rating as opposed to the ratee, which is our town manager, getting impacted? And I got to tell you that. I mean, I looked at these, and we only got these just yesterday afternoon, and I appreciate the time that you took to put them all together. So, but it's pretty clear that there's something going on when one select board member, every category is a 5. As you said, exceeding expectations in every category, or every category is a 1. I don't think we had anybody who every category was a 1, but we did have every category is a 5. And as I said in my comments, I think that there's a concern about, for me, in the same category where there are 1s and 5s in the same category, something's going on there. And it may not be to our responsibility to figure it out, but I would think that at this point, the town manager ought to say, and I know what's coming, but so I'm going to say it anyway, is there's nothing I'm going to do that ever going to get this person above a 1. And that may be the case, and it may not be the case, but if you've got 1s and 5s, there's some discrepancy going on in that performance, and I think that I'm not looking to do anything with the numbers. I think the point of taking averages is meaningless, particularly where you got 1s and 5s. I mean, that's clearly a case, your head's in the oven, the feet's in your freezer, and you say on average I'm doing okay, and you're dead. And so I think the issue is the document stands on its own. It is what it is. There are 5 separate ratings. I think it's the right way to present it, the way it is being presented right now. I challenge the town manager to continue to look at the areas where people have been specific enough to indicate things that are opportunities to do things differently in particular cases, and move those that they can. The ones that'll never move from a 1 may never move from a 1, but they need to, and hopefully that's not the case, but there needs to be an ongoing, continuous effort, whether it was last year to this year or this year to next year. I am truly remain concerned over issues certainly I identified. I'll be glad, and I hope everybody else on this board will also offer to sit down with the town manager one-on-one to give more detail, to say, if you're trying to read my mind, you can't do it, so why don't I sit down with you and explain to you the kinds of things that I would like to see happen differently in this category versus that category. I offered to do it last year, it didn't happen. I'm offering to do it again, and I hope everybody else does the same thing. But your question of where do we go from here, I'm not sure we need to go from anywhere from here. There is no requirement that we do have any other consolidation than what you've already done.
All right.
There is no, agreement that we do anything other than, and I assume at some point, talk about the town manager's salary for next year separately, and we'll probably do that in an executive session since it's a negotiation issue. But there is no requirement that we do anything else, so I'm not going to lose sleep over what's our next steps.
Do I get to respond as the next step?
No, we're not through yet. You'll get it, Stephen. Can you wait just a minute?
Okay.
Maureen?
Yeah.
The only thing on the next step is if we could put in June to sit and look at this form. Because, as you said, we can't change the form mid-year because he has to be able to know what the targets are.
We can do it now.
So we can do it now
Right.
before the new fiscal year.
Yeah.
So I think that might be something we want to really look at, and I know that this month is crazy with the agenda, so maybe if we set aside and say June, we really need to spend some time and put together, I think, not just another form and change it a bit, but also we really should be setting our goals before the fiscal year, so that we, as a board and as a town, know what we're aiming for. And I know up till now, they've been project-oriented, and I know, Mark, in the past, you've talked about SMART goals and trying to find, and I think maybe we should set aside time in June where we sit down as a board and just really hash it out and try to come up with something, even if it's in the form of a retreat, so we have our goals and our form in place before July 1st. I know it's a big effort, but I would say that's, I think, our next step.
Right. There was one point I was going to mention real quick. There was, like picking up on your point, when I was typing the information, I just stopped and I even went and talked to my wife. I said, I don't know how you do this. I said, we've got 5 people and everybody gave them a different grade on this element. We went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I said, that's impossible. There's something broken. It's impossible.
It speaks volumes.
Or if it is possible, then it totally demonstrates what I said earlier, that it's impossible for one person to satisfy 5 people. I can't imagine, because I pretty clearly demonstrated that on the one element.
Or maybe it's the category and the description of the category, and what we need to do is to narrow it down to something we all read the same thing, because it's language. When you say quality of agenda information, wow, my view of what the quality is obviously very different from everyone else's.
Maria, I would argue that you don't narrow it down, you broaden it, because when you narrow it down, it gets far more easy to nitpick. I think that these topics, 10 topics, were far too narrow, in my opinion. And if you go back several years, we had broad areas of budgeting, communications, what I'll call personnel, HR kinds of things, and development. And broad enough that you could drive a truck through, but also broad enough so that any individual element that may have fallen short, there were enough others to bring that broader topic up. I mean, if you get it down to, implemented contract with MGM, you either do well or you don't do well, as opposed to making that part of a broader element. And when you got a year's worth of work to do and the breadth of things we do, making your goals that narrow, I think is potentially problematic. But that's my opinion.
Okay, yeah, Alan.
So, I mean, I guess the reason why I asked the question of where we go from here, I mean, we could have to face that. I mean, we could have faced that last fall. Had Stephen gotten one of the jobs he was in the running for, we would have had to deal with it immediately. And to me, it just seems like we're in a really bad spot. We've signed a 3-year contract with the town manager. He's demonstrated that he's prepared to leave if a better opportunity comes along prior to the end of that 3 years. So what's the alternative? The town's business is driven by not by what we think, not by what the town needs of the towns are, but what some other town decides to employ him. And I can't imagine a worse basis upon which to conduct the town's business.
But Alex, is that different from you being a prosecutor or me doing what I mean, that's the nature of the industry, and it's the nature of almost any industry.
Well, not if you sign a contract. I mean, and I mean,
you're the attorney. Tell me what a contract.
No, I mean, a contract means that you've agreed to serve out your term. It's a two-way street. That's why you serve.
But you're the one who said the courts have indicated. I mean,
no, that it doesn't mean that you're allowed to break your contract. It's that you can sue the employee for money, as opposed to have the court enter an injunction to say, okay, employee, you need to report to work.
I'm not even interested in going there. I think it's just the nature of the industry.
And I'm not.
We'll get there.
I mean, I guess that's the point. I mean, I've been in situations where it's not even a contract, but you give your commitment that you're going to be there for a certain amount of time, and that's taken seriously.
But the response,
so we have something stronger than
that. Make the town manager not want to leave.
Right, and I tell you what, okay, I think we're going to turn it over to Stephen. You've heard us. Yeah. We're basically done here.
Paul,
Paul, do you have anything else?
No, I've said my piece, and I think let Stephen give his his view.
You have the floor, Stephen.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the members of the board for completing our reviews and spending time to fill them out. So where to start? I think I've made some highlights in the reviews, and I will try and get to these after a couple of introductory comments. But I do want to talk about the contract issue, because I appreciate what Alex is trying to say about time to move on. I mean, he did suggest that I breached my contract. I don't know which section I specifically breached. It does contemplate that I can terminate with proper notice, and I didn't forfeit my right to pursue better economic opportunities that most Americans enjoy. Similarly, the board can terminate me without notice at any time for really any reason, and I would be paid a severance package. So I think I just want to make sure that the people watching at home understand what my employment agreement actually is, not a hypothetical thing in case law. So when I got the reviews, I did what I did last year, which is I took the scores, answered them for the 10 items for each member of the board, and then I also gave the same form to the department heads to be submitted to me, to be submitted to Debbie anonymously, so I haven't seen them. And then she, in turn, entered their grades. And there's not 100% carryover because some of the things are unique to serving the select board, or some of the departments say, you know, my perception of how I serve as a select board is this. No, so, you know, when I saw the ones from last year, that's what they said. So I only received 7 back, but I will just go through the average of each one. So for the board, it's 4.4, and if you guys don't want me to say who's who, I don't have to, but I think everyone will figure it out. 4.4, 5.0, 2.5, 1.3, 1.5. So then for the 7 department heads who I don't know who they are, and this is on a scale of 1 to 5, 3.8, 4.0, 4.9, 4.3, 3.9, 4.3, and 5.0. So which guy am I? Am I the guy who the people who work most closely with him evaluate minimally in the high 3s? Or am I the guy who am rated very low by the people I don't work all that closely with? And so I spent some time thinking about that. Well, I think I know which person I am. And I know the people that I work with who put me in a position to be highly effective and successful and accomplish a lot of things that I think we've accomplished this year. So, in thinking about, and I was going to get into the areas of communication and some of the level of specificity, but I mean, I don't really want to argue. I don't think some of this is fair. I don't think some of it's accurate, but I'm not going to necessarily go point for point. But just as I was prepping to come over here, I had a thought, and I remember an email that I received on April 1st, 2013, which was the day before I started, from Barry Del Castillo, who, and Alex, you've referenced his comments about capital plan as gospel, so I'm hoping you'll accept these comments in a similar fashion. So some of it was about specific members of the department. I'm not going to read that part, I guess, non-public, but it says, soon after I began, and Paul was copied on this, soon after I began my service to the select board, the board asked me if I would provide them with an evaluation of department heads. I said that I would determine whether I could do that in some form in compliance with the town charter and state personnel privacy statutes. I have chosen to provide you, that's me, with that evaluation with a copy to the chair of the select board, emphasizing that the valued nature of some of this content means that it's not a public document. I find the departments to be a very good group, competent in their knowledge and skills, dedicated and caring in their service, highly collaborative amongst themselves, and capable of, quote, taking punches in a professional manner. And how long was Barry here? 6 months?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then he talks about the department heads. Department heads are impacted by requests for information that either go directly from them to the select board members or go to the town manager with a copy to department heads, both of which I believe are in violation of the select board's own request for information policy. And he references the citation. Understandably, department heads sometimes respond directly and occasionally actually send out information on their own to the select board, usually copying the town manager. There may be no particular problem when the information involved is pretty much routine, but tolerance of that has led to inquiries that are far from routine, i.e. with agendas that are hidden or not so hidden. The ability of the town manager to manage is compromised, the charter is compromised. Department heads are also impacted by a decidedly negative approach by some or most select board members with some frequency in public meetings. Now, Alex, this also predates your service, but I'll leave it to others to judge whether it applies. Questioning of or about department heads or department heads' recommendations often occurs with a quote, edge in words or tone of voice, sometimes downright disrespectful. Employees pay benefits and are often referred to negatively. Employees' pay and benefits are often referred to negatively. Department heads never respond disrespectfully and only occasionally respond with any level of, quote, pushback. In fairness, I have also heard that select board members have not been satisfied with responses that they have received to issues or inquiries. I apparently have not satisfied them in at least some of these matters. It is now up to you to manage the process and their level of satisfaction. For what it's worth, Barry Del Castillo managed the town of Amherst, which is a pretty big job for, I think, 25 years. And the reason why I share this is to really highlight what I think Richard said, and that is, I don't know that it's possible to achieve a group level of satisfaction. The comments in your reviews made it abundantly clear that I am not meeting some of your individual expectations for communication or performance or responsiveness or decision-making, and that's fine. As we've said, it's perceptions and your own judgments that you're entitled to make. But I do believe a part of this, the first criteria is service to the select board. It's not all, how do I serve individual members, it's service to the board as a whole. One comment was made about cutting and pasting poor communication entry from last year's review. And I would cut and paste my response, which was, I believe a lot of the confusion about what constitutes satisfactory communication has to do with understanding of roles and responsibilities and what information is an appropriate level of information for the board to have and when it is timely and not timely. The comment was made in the comments that there's a better way to do it. I've asked for 2 years for a facilitator to come in and go through all of that and try and highlight a better way to do it. So I think this question of roles and responsibilities, and we did get a letter from we did get an opinion from town council on that. We really kind of tossed it aside and haven't really addressed it. But individual member satisfaction versus full board satisfaction. I was relieved that a highly regarded, well-respected, long-time veteran in my profession had the same problem I have in meeting the group satisfaction of the board. Because, I take this work very seriously, and I am very sincere in trying to do the best I can to present the board with good information, comprehensive information, answer the questions before they get asked, and serve the needs of the town. And I certainly consider myself far from the source of a democratic crisis in local government. I hardly think that, I have my bad days, and there are times I may not get back to people quickly enough, but I hardly think I'm not here in the service of the people. There certainly are times where I give people answers to questions that they don't really want to hear. Sometimes I think that probably makes them angry at me and sullies their perception of me as a professional and as a human being. That's a part of the gig. It's been like that my whole career in government. It's going to be like that as long as I continue to serve. That said, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not serving the town's best interest, because oftentimes the answer I give are what are either the bylaws or the policy or what we can do. And there may be some subjective judgments, but I do believe that in my role as town manager, I am authorized to make some of those subjective judgments. I guess in going through some of the comments, I don't. I think there was a comment was made that my approach to town management jeopardizes the safety and finances of the town. And I hope that not everybody feels that way. I felt like that was maybe a bit of an overstatement. I feel like the budget that's in that warrant is very solid. I know there was a comment made about in a year where there's 0% COLAs for town employees, we should expand new programs, and I was surprised to see that because the board was the one that came up with the new programs in the form of enhanced capital and OPEB spending. That pretty much wiped away any additional funds to do any new programs. And the directives for the last few years have been base level service budgets, and I kept to that. I didn't agree with all the recommendations of the Finance Subcommittee for sure, but I listened to them all, we researched them all, we presented the information that they asked for. The Finance Subcommittee made its own recommendations, and that's the part of the process. When the Select Board did their budget, I don't think I overstepped my bounds in giving my feedback on it. There are times where I may weigh in on a subject that I am not authorized to vote on, but I would say that of the 6 of us, I probably have the fullest view of what's going on in the community, certainly in the 500 or so person strong town and school organization. And I hear reports from department heads and members of the community constantly. My whole job is being here completely engaged in the affairs of the town. And that is my full-time job. it is not a part-time job. And so that's where, there are times where I think maybe I have a role to advise the board on unintended consequences or other factors for consideration in their policy deliberations. That is what town managers do. So I think, like I said, I don't want to go point for point. I certainly don't want to suggest to anyone that when I asked which guy am I, I'm not the all five guy. You know, I appreciate the generosity with that those ratings came in, both from some board members and from most of the department heads, but I am fallible. I have made mistakes. If there's something that I think sets me apart from other people that I have worked with and other people who have managed me, it is that I am probably the first person to admit when I've made a mistake. My approach may sound resolute to some of you, but I think as the two board members who I've worked most closely with over the past 2 years and have seen me in action know that I spend a lot of time gathering information. I don't react to things, I respond to them. And so if I want to argue for my recommendation or to justify the decision I made, it's usually based on a lot of input, a lot of asking questions. I would say Paul Pasturza gets asked almost on a daily basis for his input on what I should do. And so I just want to separate what I believe is fair and accurate from what I believe is, quite frankly, unwinnable and unchangeable in perceptions of the town manager, which I think I've laid out from Mr. Del Castillo's email, predate my arrival here. And, continue just tomorrow, no matter what we say here tonight, tomorrow I'm going to come back in and continue to serve the town to the fullest extent of my abilities in the most serious and sincere way I can until the day that my employment here ends, either by my volition or your action. It is a privilege to be able to be the Long Meadow town manager despite the negativity, and I think I too share a desire for a more collaborative relationship with the board. But for that to happen, I believe there needs to be more clarity, more consensus, more consistency, and quite honestly, more kindness. More kindness between the five of you, and I would say more kindness towards me. Alex, with respect to your request to meet, I admire your ability to compartmentalize sentiments that you share toward me. I don't have as good of an ability to do that, although I will say, Richard's review last year we talked about. I think that meeting, the night of my review, you reorganized the board and you became chair. And we had a storming, norming, informing, and performing arc to our working relationship as chair and town manager, which is the standard in most communities where the chair works most closely with the town manager. But it wasn't too long that we got over it and put it aside and worked together for the betterment of the community. So I've proven that I can do that. But, this is a relentlessly negative environment. And it was a relentlessly negative environment before I got here. And it's still a relentlessly negative environment now. And I will apologize for not being able to cure that. But I'm limited in my gifts to overcome that. And I feel badly because I do want a collaborative, more positive relationship. But there needs to be some ownership about the negativity and about only setting out to find what's wrong. Because there's a lot of great things in this town that happen daily. And it's remarkable how, if I only looked at my emails, mostly from board members, I would think we were on fire and sinking into the earth. And that's not an easy environment to work in, and that you'll note that the timeline of when I did seek employment elsewhere was after my review, because I worked really hard in my first year here to start accomplishing some of the goals of the select board. I received a very negative review from the majority of the board, that's true. did not really get very much acknowledgement for the arbitration win with MGM, which honestly still bothers me to this day. I don't know how many town managers out there go toe-to-toe with a billion-dollar global corporation and win, but you have one who did. And so I decided, do I want to? I care about what I do. I think I'm good at it. I'm passionate about it. And but it's possible somebody else will want me. But my family and I like it here. My daughter's going to be disappointed that her track coach wants to see her dad move on. But I don't know. I guess the bottom line is, I'm telling you how I feel about my performance as well as your judgment about my performance. And I honestly think that a lot of things that are said in that document say more about the board's humanity than my performance. And, where do we go from here? I don't know. I mean, the board certainly enjoys the right to vote at any time to non-renew my contract. If that's what you want to do, then so be it. But I think I truly believe that the town organization minimally and the townspeople would be the worst for wear if that happened. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments? Thank you, Stephen. Let's see, the next agenda, I believe, is the tax rate presentation.
Get the projector.
Are you going to need the projector
Yeah.
up there, Paul?
I mean, we don't need it, but we could use it.
You got the controller, Paul? Oh, he's got.
You gotta turn the thing on. I gotta plug this deal in.
Yeah, they got the remote.
Yeah.
I don't work it. There it is.
Yeah.
Now, there's something in the packet that we got that it says Prop 2.5 presentation. Is that the right
Right.
document? Okay.
That's what it is.
You have this spreadsheet. In fact,
Yeah.
there's a sheet at the end. You'll have to look at your Excel. I kind of put it into PowerPoint slide and added a couple of things. That's what I was doing when you came to get your mail. There we go.
I want to just start off by prefacing this, that this is, this tax rate issue is something I brought up during the budget deliberation times, that, potentially we're looking at if we are going on the same pattern, that we're going to hit both limitations of Proposition 2.5. I don't mean this to be an alarm or a doomsday scenario, but I just want to make sure everybody's aware of how this works, and that we have time to make adjustments one way or another, whether it's, through additional revenues, non-tax revenues, whether it's reducing budget size, whether it's increasing market values of our homes through some mechanisms, through legislation, whatever. I just want to make sure that everyone fully understands this Proposition 2.5 calculation and how it all works, and give some of the history. And kind of set this up. It's almost like being a weatherman. The currents off the west coast of Africa are such that there's a potential hurricane coming 5 or 6, 6 days away, and if certain conditions happen, we're doomed. However, the likelihood of all those conditions happening is very unlikely. But again, just want to preface all that with some of this information that's going to be presented, that it is not a doomsday presentation. I don't want anybody to take it that fact. It's
I just want
information.
to ask a simple question: is what's the genesis of this presentation? And by that I mean, we just went through a budget process in which we spent to the levy limit with even tonight we just voted on that extra $142,000 to go to sidewalks and stuff. So we spent every nickel that we could. And the question I have is, and I asked this and I didn't get the answer. At least I didn't think I got an answer as to what's the genesis of doing this before town meeting and after the budget vote that we just had. I mean, this would have been a great presentation probably to have for the board prior to the budget to discuss whether or not we wanted level service and so forth. And I just, because this is going to be a public forum, we're obviously doing this to educate the public about.
For me, it's the education of the Proposition 2.5 formulas, giving ample time for if there needs to be adjustments, so on and so forth. If certain marking conditions don't change, or if they get worse, where do we stand? Things to that nature, Paul. I don't, I'm just trying to present numbers and history here.
Yeah, and Paul, the genesis may come back the fact that I've talked about this for 2 or 3 years. When I was on Capitol, I was concerned. The concern started when I looked at how many needs the community had, and we were funding at such a low level. And it went from that into talking with Paul several times and talking about, well, the Prop 2.5. The Prop 2.5 is going to drive us to the tax limit if certain factors stay neutral. And it could, and as he will show, this could happen in a 5 to 6 year period. And it could happen in a 10-year period. But one thing is almost for certain, I don't think anybody will disagree, it will happen. And I don't think there's ever been a discussion of this brought before the board where the board has sat and talked about it, or especially gained public input to try to get acceptance for how do we steer us into the next 15, 20, 30 years of our community. So that's the genesis of the thing. And by the way, I've got correspondence. I think I sent you back when you were the chair back in 2013. It was basically the same issue. I found an old email where I'd sent. So it's something that I've always had a concern for. It's nothing new.
Richard, can I just interject one thing? I mean, because you've said this sort of a lot, and sort of by repetition, some things sort of become conventional wisdom. I mean, I guess the thing that I'd be interested in learning more about, because it's not obvious at all to me that it is inevitable. I mean, I'm looking at the spreadsheet, and we're going to get more into it, but I mean, rather than say it's inevitable, I think we ought to sort of examine that question.
No, it's inevitable.
I
Well-
respectfully disagree,
Yeah.
Richard.
Well, there is a, okay,
I mean,
let me put it this way.
I mean, that's
Under
a statement of fact, not quite with the level of certainty of mathematical certainty, you know.
Let me put it this way, with the level of services that we provide right now, and with everything in this town, if we continue, it's almost certainly inevitable that we will hit the wall.
Well, I guess that's a question about real estate value.
Well, he'll get into the scenarios.
Well, I mean, if we've got
Yeah,
expertise
I
on
mean,
that.
yeah, if I suddenly can pay $1 million worth of taxes every year for my house, then right, we can keep pushing it on down the
I'm
road.
not going to waste my time.
But now let him get into the discussion, and
Yeah, that's what
I
I'm
think
saying,
it'll bring it
but,
out.
I mean, but I don't think we have to prejudge it. before we-
Stephen, are we going to make this happen or not?
No, I don't even know that I have the right cord. I don't recall.
Oh, that's right, you're not on Apple, are you?
Yeah, I'll just go with the spreadsheets for now. It's,
Do you have it on here?
I don't know if I've got it or not.
It was in our packet.
Yeah, if I do, it's in there then. I didn't look at it because I'd seen the sheet before.
Fix the spelling probably. That's going to pop up.
I'm not on the screen.
Oh,
You can turn the lights back.
okay.
So, if I may just add my thoughts to what's the genesis of this. Master planning was raised, I believe, during my interview as a priority. It's one of the goals. We identified that it was one of the goals. And in terms of the long-range master plan, and I think I've already indicated that we received a letter requesting, soliciting requests for direct local technical assistance from PVPC. So we have the planning aspect, master planning, PVPC, DLTA thing hanging out here. And at the same time, during our budget discussion, the finance director has made the comment several times that there is a limit to how much your tax rate can be. And so we
Stephen, if you turn that on, he's going to try to get it up there from his.
but the sheets, but my PowerPoint isn't gonna go up there. That's fine, I can turn it back on.
Okay. because he turned it off. It'll come back up. Go ahead. Sorry.
So, you need to usually plan for a reason. I mean, the long-range master plan was done in 2004. Conditions locally have not changed dramatically since 2004. But when you couple that with the spending trends of the town throughout the past, we went back 30 years, and this notion that we're going to hit a wall on the tax rate, it really spoke to the need to begin the conversation now, because essentially what will eventually need to happen, in my belief, is really a change in perception about spending by town meeting. And so that's why, since it's really so there's a heavy educational component to this planning process I anticipate to be months long. It's really a community dialogue more than anything else. And so that's the genesis from my end for doing this. And if you go to we can start here. If you go to your spreadsheet in tab 1, it just highlights that there are two components to Prop 2.5. The 2.5% increase every year that we're familiar with, but then also the can't be 2.5% evaluation, which translates into a $25 per thousand tax rate.
Stephen, can I just suggest, because it get into things, Alice and I had shared some emails, and there was a state primer on this, and Paul had seen this too, that talked about the second one as the levy ceiling as opposed to the levy limit, so that we can talk about levy limit of a 2.5% above last year versus what's called the levy ceiling, which is the $25. And if we use that nomenclature, sometimes it helps not lessen the confusion, I guess.
Well, that's why I refer to it as tax rate versus tax levy. And I guess because levy limit and levy ceiling, because we went through that, it was too close for me. And so tax rate is something that's, now everyone knows it's a derivative number. But tax rate is something very different from your tax levy. So I'm happy to use whatever nomenclature you're comfortable with. I just felt like it was easier to call it the tax rate versus the tax ceiling.
Is that where you're on?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you go to calc, the tab labeled calc, that is our Proposition 2.5 calculation for FY16. Projection, correct.
And I just want to, I also want to make a statement here that that when we talk about the levy limit, that and that levy limit cannot hit the 2.5% or the $25 maximum, we are not talking about the maximum allowable levy, which includes exclusions. We are talking about the amount before exclusions. So our levy in FY15 that was passed, or I shouldn't say it was passed because we split the rate, but had we gone with a single rate, our tax rate would have been $23.76. However, the number that we're concerned with is the $21.91. It is the number that is prior to the exclusions, the debt exclusions that we have, a number of them mainly for school construction. So I just wanted to make that point
And Paul,
clear.
did splitting the tax rate reduce that number?
No, I believe that they still look at a single rate.
Okay.
That when we hit the $25, it's going to be based upon the single rate, because there are communities who have a split rate who split the maximum. They go to 150, and their commercial rate would then be $28, $29, $30, with their residential rate much lower. So it's the single rate, but we've made the projection going 1 year forward, using maximums and some assumptions with new growth. And the thing that I want to point out also is we are increasing the assessed valuation in which I'm basing the tax rate in FY16 by the value that would come off that new growth. That $150,000 worth of new growth in taxes equates to a small amount of total assessed valuation as part of an increase. You see that it goes from 1.957 to 1.964. So there's about a $7 million increase that $150,000 of new growth equates to. Again, we continue, if we just, some of the other information on there, the levy ceiling for FY 2015, which would be the maximum amount that we could raise, is $48,941,698. And at this point in time, we have remaining taxing capacity, I'm sorry, I see another typo here, taxing capacity of just over $6 million. If we look at FY 16, we can start to see how the trends are. The levy limit, we start to see that it climbing up. Projected next year is 2246 tax rate. We see that we have a decreasing amount of taxing capacity going down from 6 million down to 4.1 million.
Presuming no change in valuation
That
of our
assumes no
properties.
change in valuation with the exception of the value that is gained by new growth. So the
right.
change in valuation that we'd love to see is the market value change.
Paul, in the highlighted line, we're assuming that the levy limit is the operational budget, correct?
Well, operational plus capital, because we do raise and appropriate for capital.
What we vote at town meeting, operational, well, capital is part of my
Okay.
view, okay. So the yellow line here is just, so when we see the tax and capacity go down, it's just due to the operational budget.
It's due to it's doing, not necessarily for the operation, but it's the assumption that we're raising to the levy limit, the first part of Proposition 2.5, where we're increasing 2.5%. That's what's really driving it. And you're right, the budget is directly related to that, Paul, because the budget, we basically base our budget upon the maximum levy capacity.
Right, so that's what I'm saying is it's budget driven, not necessarily.
It is budget driven, but what I'm showing here is the maximum taxing capacity.
Yep.
So the next slide basically just gives an overview of the FY15, some FY15 numbers, that we would have had an allowable taxable levy of $46,523,000 because of rounding of the tax rate where we can only go to 2 decimal points. We raised a little bit less than that, and we had what was known as excess levy capacity of just over or just under $19,000. The town of Long Meadow has a history of raising to the levy capacity that we have, raising to the levy limit. With the exception of these 6 years, over the last 31 years, we have raised to the levy limit. And even these amount, with the exception of 1997, are fairly small when you look at a percentage basis.
Yeah. And I believe we mentioned that this is pre-charter, so this was when
This is certainly pre-chartered. The last time we did not raise to the levy limit, it was 1999, where we left $277,000.
Oh, screensaver.
$277,000 on, I don't say on the table, but we did not raise to the maximum capacity. I honestly don't remember. I didn't go back and look at why, but again, I just want to make the statement that since this information that I was able to derive off the state website, this goes back to the 1985, and Proposition 2.5 only was implemented a couple years before that, that we have basically generally raised to the levy limit that we could have.
And I think that when I saw that information, that's when I really started to view this planning process as an educational exercise and a cultural shift exercise as well. Because when we had the discussion about the extra money for the budget, Paul, it's town meeting has a history of spending. And I mean, this lays it bare that the town meeting, who has the final say on all spending decisions, goes to the max every year. And that's where I think we need to educate town meeting voters about the long-term consequences vis-a-vis our tax rate, in terms of, about continuing to spending at the same clip and in a meaningful way.
Stephen, this isn't an argument, but it's a discussion here of, when you say that the town meeting has spent to the levy limit every year, I guess the question we need to look at, or the evaluation we need to make is that because the budget that came to them was at the levy limit, or because the budget came below the levy limit and there was a motion made at town meeting to go and say, whoa, we've got $127,000 excess, and therefore we're going to spend it. And I think there's a differential, because if the leadership is bringing a max spending budget, the town says, I trust the leadership, we need all this stuff, and they pass it. If, on the other hand, the leadership consistently brings less than the full town levy limit, and there goes in what we euphemistically call a money grab at town meeting, because a special interest group or a well-meaning group of individuals say, there's money available, let's spend it, and I've got the votes to do that. Those are two very different things, and I think we owe it to the analysis to see if we can't take a look and see which was happening. Was it because we were taking the full limit, or the town was doing things on their own?
Can I respond to the discussion? I was asking because he was kind of engaged. He says,
yeah, I mean, I'm not accusing anybody. I'm
discuss back. No, I think, Mark, it's a distinction without a difference, and that is, there may be times where people have come in and said, I remember my first town meeting, it wasn't my budget, but they gave $353,000 to the schools, and the money wasn't even there. That was over the levy limit. But there clearly hasn't been a movement, other than the 4 times in 30 years, where people have come to town meeting and said, we're not spending all of that money. So the flip side of that is, yes, it may have been a maximum levy budget each year presented by the select board, but on the other hand, there wasn't a movement in town meeting, and there are a lot of town meetings in the Commonwealth where the town meeting personality is to show up and
be careful what you ask for. You might just get it, kind of thing. I mean, tonight we had an opportunity to go in at $140,000 below the levy limit, and we chose to move it into the capital spending for sidewalks, and rather than go in at a lower level. Now, I'm really not looking to encourage people on the town meeting floor to say, the heck with you guys, we want to say, and let them, who haven't spent the months and months and months we spent on the budget, start picking apart where they're going to cut the money, because I'm concerned that they'll pick places that aren't too desirable.
Right.
But
I think that's why there's a...
Mark, I mean, there are investments that actually save money. One of the things that Richard's point that I still carry away from his presentation last year, remember the curve? And investments in roads early on save more money. The payoff is several dollars per every dollar invested.
That's an argument to make at town meeting floor. My only point was...
No. I mean, you were... I guess the reason why I'm saying this is because when we decided just now to put that $144,000 in, to me, that's not pure consumption. I mean, that's not buying something that's going to be gone next year. It's something that's going to pay off, and then, could save us money in the long run.
Right, and
so therefore, it's not a fiscally, it's a frugal way of approaching it, not in.
I'm not trying to argue my concern is that, again, if and goes back to the original question, if we're bringing max levy limit budgets to town floor, and we being the town leaders, that's a very different system than town leaders not bringing a max levy limit budget to town floor and people on town floor voting that way. Because I don't want to get to the point where we end up with people on town floor saying, we're fed up with this spending and we're going to decide what the cuts are based on this 15 or 20 minute discussion. Because that, to me, would be potentially dangerous to where the cuts would come.
No, I agree with that.
And so, the goal is to get the sense of the town meeting and say, if the town meeting is looking to not take the levy limit, there won't be a money grab. Let's do the cutting ourselves as the town leaders, if that comes up. And clearly, I'm not talking about this year, but as you go forward, using 2.5% every year says that FY21, we're in deep trouble if nothing else changes. And
I think we're jumping ahead. I think we need to have a complete explanation of what the situation is, and then as town leaders, we sit with our professional staff and say, what should we put in? What 4 or 5 things do we need to put in to start changing the trend? Just like we did with the policy on capital planning. And we show leadership and we have a plan that's thoughtful and we present it to the town, we see that the town is willing to look at increased investment in OPEB or in capital planning or our sidewalks. But so right now, we're in the very beginning of this process, so we can totally understand what the situation is, what the trends are, and then I think the conversation will be in this board, what are the recommendations? So
Well,
I'd like to
Go
hear
ahead.
the rest of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we want to get through the rest of the presentation, but I think, Mark, you are jumping ahead. This is not an answers session. This is kind of identify some of the parameters, some of the factors that are driving our thinking in terms of the need to plan. And again, it's a cultural shift. I think, and you'll see in a later slide, the real reason why we have to plan ahead is because we don't get very much new growth. And without new growth, we're only as good as the amount we're willing to invest in ourselves year in and year out. The quality of life this community enjoys, we have to sustain through basically the assessed values that we have today. And that's the whole point, is that there's not swaths of developable land that could bail us out if we attracted a developer. There's nothing like that's really where the careful decision-making process needs to be. So we don't need to, it's not going to be kind of I'm trying not to make it a reactive process where we're going to show up and cut, randomly. It's just educate people in terms of what the long-term financial complexion of the town is in terms of assessed value. This really comes down to assessed value.
And to that point, because we've been talking about, I am really interested in understanding the assumptions behind the assessed value, because when I look at your next slide where it talks about levies and limits, we had 2006 total assessed value was $2.11 million. Billion, sorry. $2.11 billion. And under the first scenario on the top, under projection, we never get there in 2023. With just a 1% increase, we don't make it back there until 2021. I mean, that is an extraordinary statement of real estate value in this town. I mean, you're talking about a 15-year period where things that are, that the assumption is that it will take us from 2006 to 2021 to get to the same real estate value. And I understand there was a slump, but I mean, I really question the valuation or even a 1% growth. I mean, we're in a situation where we're coming out of a recession. Real estate tends to go up over time. And I don't know, maybe you guys have done a real estate analysis. But to me, this whole, the need for cultural shift and education and responding to a crisis and sort of all comes down to how good is that assumption on real estate value?
And it's only an assumption, and you have identified it as 1%. I don't know what is the norm nowadays. I mean, everything has changed. This is the new norm. Is the concept that's always been thrown out. This is the weather patterns. This is the new norm. So I've only thrown in the assumption. I've identified the assumption. I'm hoping I'm wrong. I'm hoping it's much greater.
But I mean, there must be learning out there. Because to me, like that's the $64,000 question.
Well, I think, Alex, to your point, the educational component doesn't necessarily come down to the assumptions on assessed value. I think it's assessed value at its essence is based on sales of homes and their values.
Right. In other words, the real estate market.
Correct. So what sustains the real estate market? And what decisions does town meeting make with its money that helps enhance and sustain that assessed value? And it's a much more gradient level of economic development or community development, if you will, than most communities do. But because we don't have, like I said, developable areas, we're really need to drill down into what our existing conditions are and what are the kind of gradient ways that the small things we do, the investments we make in tennis courts or sidewalks or what have you, or our schools, that make people want to buy houses in Long Meadow and pay more than they would in another town, which is what keeps that overall assessed value number either sustained or growing. And that's something, another part of this planning process is going to be working with local realtors and having kind of a summit or seminar to have them educate us on what they hear from their buyers and their sellers. Why are people selling their homes? What are buyers in Long Meadow look for? Things like that, to kind of inform this formula at a very detailed level.
No, I get that point, but I mean, do you really think those are the major factors? I mean, the major factors, the economy, people's incomes, the relative demand for housing in the area.
Jobs in the area?
That's what I'm saying, incomes, jobs. I mean, you know, I mean, to me, like, you know, whether we have a tennis court or not, that is a very, you know, tiny part of the analysis.
No, because it's an issue of are you buying in East Longmeadow, or Agawam? Where are they going to buy that house? Is it the schools? Is it the tennis courts? I think these are a lot of questions we don't have the answers for. So he's putting some numbers up there just to begin the discussion on trends and how important it is to just tick that number up a little bit, and then so we'll come up with solutions later. But this is just, let's hear the presentation.
These numbers go to whether there's a problem to begin with.
Oh,
I mean,
okay. All right.
I mean, unless somebody can tell me that 1%, you know, there's evidence behind 1%.
Let's get to the end of the presentation.
I'm just trying to show a trend for the most part
I
here,
get it.
and the trend is not favorable at this point in time, and it could change at any point in time. You're absolutely right.
If we didn't have this conversation now and in 2021, we were like, oh, by the way, select board, you're at max cap, how would that go over? So that's why we're doing this now. We hope we don't hit it. Of course we don't, because then people are paying max tax rate and we're shedding services. It's just, and we feel like we owe it to the town and the select board and town meeting to just say, this is on the radar screen, let's start peeling the onion on this and not overreact to it. That's all.
Again, we have projections now on the next tab. And again, we're making some assumptions. The first assumption on the upper part is the only new value that we are garnishing is the value from the new growth. And there is no market gain or any which way, shape, or form. And given our current assessment and giving that assumption, and given the assumption that we spend to the maximum levy capacity annually, that in the year 2021, based upon those assumptions, we are going to hit the maximum tax rate that we can under Proposition 2.5. Now, again, those are assumptions, and I just want, as long as you folks understand the assumptions, whether you agree with them or disagree with them, as long as you understand them, you can go into that same spreadsheet and change around whatever you want to come up with, whatever every year you want. But these are the assumptions that I put in. The lower level assumes a 1% increase above and beyond the new growth values that are projected over the next number of years, and that new growth amount, I mean, we'll get into it, it's kind of an average of historical amounts that we've received in new growth, but that lower level amount assumes an additional 1% in market value above the new growth assessment, and that would push us off into the year 2023 based upon those assumptions that I put in here. Again, an additional 1% annual growth in assessed value.
So Paul, that's a sensitivity on assessed value. Is there is it worth looking at sensitivity on new growth? In other words, maybe the question is what kind of new growth or what other sources of income that,
That's all going to be part of this, Mark.
Okay.
It's a planning process.
I also want to mention that historically, over the last 10 years or so, but obviously over the last 10 years, any type of new growth that we've achieved, we've raised to the maximum levy, and we've used that new growth annually in the budget process.
Right.
We haven't saved any of that. Again, we haven't had astronomical amounts of new growth in any one year. The next slide kind of has where our new growth has been and what the historical amount of the new growth. We had, we hover somewhat around $200,000 from the year 2006 to the present, those first couple of years. But recently it has declined, with the exception of 2015, And in 2015 has a couple of asterisks next to it because it was a year we had the measure and list, the 9-year reval where every house was inspected to make sure that the number of bathrooms were accurate, the square footage was accurate. There was probably $80,000 to $90,000 minimally, if not more, that was discovered just because of that measure and list revaluation process. So our new growth is not an astronomical number per year. Over you look at 2013, the low of $130,000. 2014, 146, and again, 2015, as I just explained, had that measure and list aspect, which again captured a lot of new growth. 2011 it was another year that certain things happened. It was $238,000, but that was the year that we challenged the 2 golf courses about their recreational exemption. We lost one of those, we won one of those. This is the net amount with the one that we won, and the additional new growth above and beyond that challenge to the golf courses.
It's not shown up there, but I have it here. If you add projected FY16 to that chart, the line goes right back down.
Right. It's going to go down to the 150 mark somewhere in that.
So, Paul, let me just, again, I just kind of wonder about the measurement. I mean, we're talking about $200,000 of improvements townwide. I mean, that seems grossly under what people are putting into their houses. I mean, $200,000 for the whole town? I mean, there's probably people who've done that to one house, you know?
It's $200,000 worth of taxes, though. That amounts to $7 or $8 million worth of value.
Okay, all right, I got you.
Okay.
I got you, okay.
And again, this is, the history. It doesn't weigh very much with, again, there are a few anomalies in there. And again, the expectation is that it's going to go back to the area of 150 to 200,000, somewhere in that vicinity over the foreseeable future. We're basically built out. The new growth that we get are for basically home improvements, maybe some minor additions. There are a couple new houses that pop up on an annual basis, but overall, we just don't have the capacity, or I guess there are a couple areas of development, which Stephen can allude to. We do have a couple areas. But again, we're very limited in what we have as far as land and developable land. The last part is just a history of all this information. We go back all the way to fiscal year 1995, where we have what our levy limit was, what our maximum levy limit was, what our taxes were in those particular years, the excess capacity as a % of the maximum levy, the levy ceiling in those particular years from 1995 to 2015, override capacity, the assessed value, and again, you can look at the history and how at certain points it jumps up because of the economy, market values, markets in general, and then what our tax levy limit is as compared to that 2.5%. And again, we're just on the upswing, and now that's why we mainly want to bring it to your attention. We go back into 1985 and we were at 2%, and then we dropped down in 1988 because of a big upswing in the market. We were down to 1.37.
So Paul, what column do I divide by which column to get the tax rate?
To get the tax rate, the total tax levy divided by the assessed value. So D by I.
Paul, we get down to 2015, $1.957 billion. You just mentioned the triennial valuation. Obviously, that's not in there, or is it? Because that was just completed.
It is in there.
So that is the new number from what we just went through
Yes.
the last 6 months or so?
Yes.
Okay.
Just to sort of get at the assumptions about I'd be interested to how it is from 2013 to 2015, we've actually gone down in value.
The formulas are a bit of a look back. You look at previous sales to determine the assessed value, and that's why 2009, 10, 11, when in reality the market was terrible condition, the assessed values were strong, is because they're looking back at sales from, previous years.
Right.
But
in the
there's
long
also
run,
a
it's-
lag too of well over a year with
No,
sales
okay,
data. But
okay, I
it's
get
sales data,
that.
but there's a pretty good lag in there of at least a year.
But, and see, that's, to me, before we start getting off, into the analysis of what the tax levy is, we need to look at a better sense of what the real estate market is going and where it's going right now. My sense of it, everything I've read, is that things are on the upswing after a long period of a lull. And I guess the other question I have is how does our assessment match up? How does our assessment process match up to what the market's doing? Is it really reflective of what the market is doing? So
I think during tomorrow's forum, if the assessors are there, they probably are best to answer that.
Right,
Or the
right.
real estate folks, again, they're going to have
Yeah.
input on that
But
very question.
how do you think we can get a better handle on, these assumptions?
I think Bob Leclerc was here and talked about during the tax rate setting meeting, they usually go through that stuff. And there are, I believe, standards for assessment that you follow, like the assessment.
No, and
like GFOA for finance, there's an assessment standard, benchmarks and standards that assessors follow as part of their. Is he certified? Is there a certification?
Yeah, for certification process through the Department of Revenue, they have standards that they must follow in order for the tax rate to be set. They have to satisfy the Department of Revenue that their assessments are accurate, period. And
Right, no, I
it's
get
based on
it.
sales data.
To me, it's two parts, though. It's how do we get a handle on what the real estate market is really doing and projected to do, and then secondly is how much does the assessment process reflect that? And I guess that's sort of to that first part. To me, to assume 1%, it's like every other part of this has got all this rigor to it, and this key component doesn't. Do you guys have a sense of where we could get better information on that?
Well, I did say I was going to put together a summit with realtors to do that a few minutes ago.
Okay.
To do just what you're saying.
Well, you were talking. I guess I didn't quite hear that because you were talking to them about things we could do in the town to make it more attractive.
Well, where's the real estate market going? How do we enhance it?
Well, I guess what
Yeah.
was just sort of an objective thing of where the real estate market is going. I'm sincerely asking that question.
Right. No, I get it, and if we can get an answer from some expert, I'm happy to
Right.
redo this,
Right,
because again, it's going to push anything greater than 1 is obviously going to
Right,
push
right.
these numbers much further, but I honestly don't know, so I'm only
Right.
kind of making that projection with the
Yeah.
assumption.
Well, I want to thank you. First of all, I'm sorry I can't be there tomorrow. I have a family issue. I have to leave town. But this is fabulous. And I know there are assumptions on here, and you began it by saying it's like the weather. You can't tell if the wind's going to pull off in another direction. But at least we need to know what are the elements that we have to look at in order to find what the solution's going to be. You're showing us a trend, and we know that we can move various variables to make changes. Whether it's getting a little hotter, the wind's going to move in another direction, it's impossible to tell. But at least we're starting to look at it. And I think that's really important because we need to be able to start doing some long-range planning. And if we don't have an idea of how much money is going to be out there, we really can't decide how to prioritize capital planning or even do major planning in town going out 10 or 20 years. So I know you don't have all the answers, but thank you for starting to put it all on the page. And I'm sure there'll be more changes that you'll be able to make changes on this almost on a monthly basis. But I think this is so essential to look at the budget year-round. And this is sort of like looking at the budget year-round and beginning the process, so when we do sit down and talk in the fall, we might have a different plan or perspective on our finances. So thanks a lot.
Well, can I suggest, I just added a column K, which was the tax rate, which is just what you did. And what I found is that over this history, there were 4 times when the tax rate dropped.
Sure.
Each time because of an reevaluation.
Right.
One time, actually in 1988, dramatically, it dropped from $22.31 to $13.99. Pretty dramatic, and that reflects a 30 or 40% increase in evaluations, the total assessed value, over a 1-year period, which pretty surprising. But again, it dropped in year 2000, year 2003, and 2006, which are also correspond to our times of revaluation of our properties. And of course, it's stopped doing that in 2009 and 12 and 15 as we hit into recession and property values went down. But I think one of the questions is, do we expect, and this is like maybe Mr. Crane, part of your question to realtors, is this new norm a long-term trend that property values aren't going to start moving up, and what rate they move up, or will they go back to the trends that we saw in the years 1997 through 2006, where every third year we got a adjustment, if you will, on this levy ceiling?
I think we certainly should ask those questions and get some kind of diagnostic sense of where they think things are going. But imagine it's 2006. And you're asking realtors, hey, do you think things are going to keep going up? Everyone was on. It's never going to end.
You're asking realtors, right?
Yeah, you're asking realtors. It's never going to end, and that's why.
Then we should ask somebody else.
Right, but it's still just a wag.
Right.
And I think my point is the stuff that is within our control, the little things that inform home sales, that a town can invest, that a town can do for itself to make itself more marketable. So whether global or regional economic trends are going up or down, how are we going to be the best Longmeadow we can be to make our home sales the most attractive they can be? And that's the kind of, when they're walking through with buyers, is it 2 pools? But you don't buyers make, Mark, you've always heard buyers make emotional decisions. So what drives those emotions? That's what we're trying to get to from the realtors. I mean,
but you don't want to make us more marketable. You want to make it so Longmeadow properties command a higher premium price relative to the neighbors.
Isn't that the same thing?
Not necessarily. More marketable means all other things being equal. Why would you choose it to live in Longmeadow? My comment is, why are you willing to pay a premium price or buy a house that costs you more in Longmeadow than it does in any of the surrounding communities? And because we want our houses to have that, or I would say we need our houses to have a higher values to protect this. But I go back to, there are other opportunities besides just housing values, and clearly, even if we gather that new growth, if our insatiable appetite to spend causes us to spend that new growth every year, we're in a zero-sum game. We get new growth and we spend it, and we're still at the levy limit. The key is spend lower than the new growth allows you to, and that's a mindset, I think, of the leadership and the town residents that says, we need to start having levy limit capacity starting this year or next year, and to say, there's $50,000 left in levy limit. Good, I got this pet project I want to put in a dog park that costs $50,000. I'll vote for that or put it in the budget. That to me is the philosophy we've got to change, because just getting more capacity, if we don't have the restraint to not spend it, doesn't do anything.
Well, you remember the purpose of this was just to open a dialogue.
I hear you, Richard.
And this is just the emphasis. This is just
Right.
the first blush.
Right.
And it's going to grow, because Mark, the questions you're asking, everybody's questions, they are questions. We don't have the future in our hands.
I mean, we've got a group of people who want a new middle school. We got a group
Right.
new middle schools. We've got a group of people who want a new senior center. Group of people, including us, who want a new DPW facility. And oh, by the way, we've got town employees who want salary increases, and we've got facilities that need to be whatever. And
Well,
so
facilities will have to be replaced eventually. We know that. The schools will have to have major money put in, and that's just normal running the town. It's unavoidable. It's a cost of
But
doing
money,
business.
as they say, money is fungible. Whether it's $1 in my front pocket that goes to fix the schools, or $1 in my back pocket that goes to give employees salary increases, it's still a tax dollar.
Well, I
There's only a
understand, but
limited
the
source of money.
discussion's not whether you build a school or not, it's when you do it. Eventually, you're going to have to do something with your schools. You've got to maintain it. And there's another factor, too, which hadn't even mentioned. There's a demographic thing. In 2020, we're on slate to be 30% of our population 65 and older. And that's climbing up. So we've got another concern a lot of communities don't have. We got a sizable population of seniors. And if all of these scenarios are good, but they still mean the taxes, if we keep spending, the taxes are still going up every single year, more and more and more. So there's another thing there. We're finally going to squeeze populations out. So it does require some long-range planning to say, what is the Long Meadow of 2030 or 2040? And I don't think it's going to be what it is today. I think it's going to be a different community. There's going to be different demographics in it. Either that, or somehow our fixed income people are suddenly going to find ways to make more money. Because 1/3 of them, I mean, we're generally pricing out 1/3 of our population when they go on fixed income. We're moving against them every year because they have no other way. They have no way to offset that cost.
Yep.
That's another concern. So there's a lot of pieces of the puzzle.
Yep.
Oh no, go! I was going to slip out just for a second.
I think it's good to have the forum. I'm not going to be here because of work, but I think it's good to start talking about it. I think just a couple statements. There hasn't been money grabs at town meeting. There's been deals cut at town meeting, right before town meeting, between former town manager, for example, in the schools and finance committee and so forth. That budget year, where it was your first budget year, was due to a horrible budget preparation and lack of communication between the town manager and the school department, quite frankly.
But that was my first town meeting.
Not you. I said that by the aforementioned Mr. Del Castillo. It was just it was not right. But each of the last 3 years, we've had the ability to not spend to our levy limit, including tonight. And we're going to have a forum about hitting the max wall and that stuff. And I think, again, go out and gather all the data in the world you want. I think assumptions are assumptions. If you put in 2 or 3%, numbers look different. If you put in 0.5%, it looks worse. So pick a number and go with it. But I think what we have is a spending problem, not a home value problem. And the market, you can put as many things in Long Meadow as you want to put in. And if real estate is down, real estate is down. If homes aren't selling, homes aren't going to sell. And when you have an interest rate environment like we have today, and homes still aren't selling, that's a comment on the economy more than it is on what makes Long Meadow better or worse than any other community. But I think gathering information and looking forward is a great thing. I think the bigger issue is the select board's had 3 opportunities in 3 years not to max out to the levy limit, and we did it. And $50,000 there and $80,000 there and whatever, $120,000, $40,000 tonight would go a long way in pushing some of that off, especially when we're talking about new growth at $150,000 or $140,000. We just spent the equivalent of 1 year's worth of new growth based on projections. I really think the inner discussion with the board should start to look at spending, and I think that's a discussion to have with the schools and between our board and the school board, and start talking about the projection of spending, because it's a spending issue. It's not I mean, if you have a 2.5 override, what does it do to the numbers?
Obviously, it's going to accelerate them into hitting the max.
Right. So it's having a 2.5 override isn't the answer, in other words.
No.
I mean, it's just, we can have it, it's just going to get us to that
Just
wall
gonna get us
faster.
there. That's right.
So the issue then isn't, it's not new growth, because new growth would only be a little bit, even if there was water tower property and 30 houses went up, that's a nice little bubble we'll have, and again, we'll tend to spend it. But I really think the conversation should be started about, between the select board and school committee and about spending and where we're going with it, because I think that's the only thing that's going to save this. I mean, I don't know what we're going to do, but I'm going to be interested to see, when you do meet with realtors, what their thoughts are about if there's an ability to move home values I don't think that's going to be the answer to solve the problem that is in front of us, so to speak. But I think everything that you can do is something we should do, let's put it that way.
Yeah, Maureen and Al.
I think it's not so much a spending problem as it's a planning problem. And I think for years, we have just pushed this aside and we said, well, you got to cut, they have to cut here, we have to cut there, you have to cut there. And instead of going back to that dynamic of who's spending more money, we got to go back to a planning. And it has to be like 5 or 6 items that are moving us and changing the trending. When we put in the meals tax, we could have said we're going to use that to start cutting back on our levy. When we could decide how much we're going to raise, when we decide on our budget directives, there has to be like multiple items of planning on how to move that trend down. And that's why I think it's something that we need to do as a town. This is going to be a town forum discussion. We should have the finance, the school committee, we should have a group of people sitting down, almost like a task force, saying, what are we going to do going forward? And I think that residents will want to be part of it, the finance committee will want to be part of it, and I'm sure the school committee, they want to have that answer too, because they don't want to hit the wall. They want to have some thoughtful planning. And maybe we have to start looking out of the box, private-public partnerships. How are we going to be able to staff the schools as we see in 10 or 20 years? So I think we should come up with some very interesting ideas, and I'm, again, very happy that you put this work into it.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
just gonna add, I quickly looked on Zillow. Their forecast for the next year in Long Meadow, based on actual sales, is a 3% increase.
Great.
And obviously, you know, that's not the best data set, but, you know, I mean, to me, sort of a more robust analysis along those lines, you know, would be really what we need to do to figure out exactly what the challenge is.
Well, and why 3%? If we're growing, why are we growing?
Yeah. Well, I guess there's more to follow. There's a pretty good discussion even up here tonight just on what you started, and this is just the first introduction.
It's going to be a long I want people to
Yeah.
understand, it's going to be a long process. There's a lot of discussions need to be had, and it's a grassroots effort to really educate the community so people, you know, can approach the issue in a unified way.
I missed half of what Paul said, but I caught the last part of it, and he's right. It's going to have to be a serious spending discussion, too, because spending habits have to be altered, but that's going to take nurturing and bringing it about, but it's all those pieces.
I don't want to belabor the discussion, but I think the key, in terms of my vision of this, it's also a spending discussion for sure, ultimately, spending dollars, but it's a value discussion. Where do we get the most value out of our money, out of our spending, that helps sustain and enhance our assessed value? What components of our budget do the most to do that? And and that's really the pathway we're on, is trying to identify those things.
Okay. Okay, well, I appreciate it, because we still got to get an executive session out of the way tonight, so. Anybody else have any questions for the guys? Okay, so we'll have basically the same thing tomorrow night, but you'll have the
Right, we'll have it
slide,
right.
and I have not got confirmation on how many's coming. I've tried, I just can't get. I know certain people are still on. I know some of the schools going to be here. Capital, I think, is going to be here, so there's going to be some of the key.
In this room.
Yeah, in this room, yeah. Okay, any subcommittee reports tonight?
No report, I'd just like to, I think it was maybe 2 meetings ago, we had some policies that we had delivered for a first reading, to see if we can get those on an upcoming agenda.
They're on the next agenda.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's
the ones
action,
that you
man.
got, Mark? Yeah, they're on the next
See?
agenda.
Ask and you shall receive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, got them.
Richard, we got to get those goals for the GFOA budget back on the agenda, too.
Okay, well, you and I'll.
Well, the directive was to do a draft. I think we did it, and I don't think we'll have to talk about it tomorrow.
Right, okay, well, you and I'll be able to get that back on. I know the part of the goal, or part of the package is already set with Mark's discussion next time, and there's a couple other items, so. Okay, nothing else? Can we need a motion to adjourn and go into
We adjourn
executive
into
session?
executive session for the purpose of contract negotiation, not to reconvene into open session.
Wait, at the time, well, and also another discussion item
Right,
for reputation and that stuff.
right, for the,
Citizen of the year.
yeah, for the Person of the Year award. We have to,
Okay.
no, we have to
all right,
finalize
all right.
it.
I make a motion, Mark did a second.
You seconded?
Yep.
Marie Angelides?
Mary Angelides, Mr. Gold?
Yes.
Mr. Foster?
Yes.
Mr. Sentinel?
Yes.
Mr. Gregory?
Yes.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We're going into executive session now. If you've heard, we're going to have a similar discussion on this forum tomorrow night. Hopefully you can tune in and watch this, and other than that, we'll see you in 2 weeks for our next town meeting, or for our next select board meeting. Thank you.
You need to include.
We'll go in the other room.